The scariest thing someone did that exposed their true self. Psychopaths walk among us. The way she was able to instantly change her character whenever she was in front of someone else. She'd turn on the charm and suddenly become the loving teacher that everyone believed she was, while behind closed doors she was the world's most horrific bully. It was almost surreal watching how quickly she was able to change her personality to be someone that everybody loved and admired. I knew a guy who praised his supervisor, called him a mentor. Not even a year later, the guy completely assumed his supervisor's life, seduced his wife and incited their divorce, championed for full custody of his superior's kids and had them call him dad, took over the guy's position at work after the guy was so stressed with the custody battle that he requested a different post. Wife got the house and the divorce, so all that too if I recall correctly. It's been 4 years and they're still in and out of court. Back when my friend group were all 18 to 19, which is the legal drinking age in the UK, we went to the city centre to get drunk. After going to a few bars or clubs, we got some food. McDonald's. One of my friends at the time threw up in a paper bag. He then saw a homeless man and gave him the bag, to which the man thought he'd been gifted food and thanked him. My heart died a little, and from being too young and shocked, I just left the scene with my group. My friend was the only one laughing. The others mentioned that was wrong and messed up, but he just shook it off. I'm sure glad he's not my friend anymore. A 48-year-old man boasting to his mother-in-law about his enrichment after his wife's death. Yes, he's my father. Yes, my mother self-deleted. She just went insane living with him. At a daycare I used to work in, there was this stepmom. Whenever she'd pick up her 3-year-old stepdaughter, she was the nastiest lady in the world. We had to watch what we said to her because any negative meant that little girl got punished. For example, we said she pushed another kid, and the stepmom really gave this little girl what for. Oof. She used to do other weird things too. Like even though this girl was fully potty trained, she insisted we put her in a diaper before she picked her up. If we didn't, it was the first thing she did. Not like a pull-up either, an actual baby diaper. We were convinced this was just to humiliate her. She had this crap-eating grin when she'd do it too. We told this to the little girl's dad and he just never believed it. Then they came to pick her up together. Instead of this mean lady, it was like Mary Poppins showed up. Complete 180 attitude change. The next day, right back to being evil stepmom. Good God, turns out there is a pre-existing real-life example of evil stepmother syndrome outside of Disney. Unlike Disney though, you can't just sit around and wait for the inevitable just desserts of the character. Hope the dad realized what the frick was happening eventually. I was with my BFF and she wanted to go back-roading with a couple of guys she knew. Sure, fine, whatever. We got in the Bronco and hit the dirt back roads while listening to music. All of a sudden, the truck comes to a stop. They yell, "Possum!" and they all run out real quick. I got out because I thought they saw an injured possum and I wanted to help. Nope, they saw a completely fine one just walking about and wanted to stomp it to death. And they did, even with me screaming and crying. My friend tried to blow it off as no big deal. I told them to take me back because I wanted to go home after that, but they wouldn't. I had to sit in that truck with those jerks until they were ready to call it a night. I did everything possible to ruin their night just so it would end and I could go home. I've never seen someone take so much pleasure in violently killing a helpless animal that did nothing wrong. That's so horrific and sad. The worst part is that possums are objectively wonderful animals. They're basically nature's cleanup crew because they literally eat parasites that can harm people and other animals. So possums literally improve their environment by making it safer for other living beings. I was having a conversation with a rich guy. He said he and his grandfather had companies where they ventured into things like mercenary work, online gambling sites, casinos, stuff like that. When I asked him whether or not he felt guilty for doing these shady things, he said he doesn't care about commoners, and he outright said that he only cares about things which give him financial utility. He also added that his grandfather was going to give him control of the companies after he died, and not to his father, because his father was seen as too weak and soft to run the business. I'm assuming he meant that his father actually had empathy, unlike the two of them. Story from a friend's relationship with her now ex-boyfriend. During some of their rough patches, he surprised her with a dog to try and rekindle the love in the relationship. Later, when she finally decided to split with him, he threatened to abandon the dog on the side of the road if she didn't stay because he, quote, had no use for the dog anymore. He really used the dog as leverage if she ever tried to leave him. Very common in really bad relationships for the bad partner to use threats or actual harm against animals as a method of control and power. There's actually recently been an animal shelter that's opened in my country to specifically take animals in situations like that to help people escape from domestic violence. A lot of people fear leaving their animals behind with their tormentor. It's one more thing that can make it so hard to leave. There's unfortunately so much demand that this shelter's swamped and they're working on opening a second one. Some girl I know is constantly waving a 9mm in her boyfriend's face. She once lost her ever-loving mind because when he got home from work, he dared to turn on the TV without her present, and she came running down the stairs with a knife and stabbed the TV several times. She's constantly saying how if he calls the cops, she'll either end them both or tell them that he committed the unspeakable act on her. This happens nearly every day, and he just goes, "No, it's okay. I'm fine sleeping in my truck." I truly feel for the guy, but he's gonna end up dead. My estranged mother bought cats solely because she planned to end them. She didn't want my younger brother growing up a, quote, wimp because he dared to cry over his goldfish when he was like 6. Also, the weirdo years later threw the cat out into the street because she was tired of it trying to sneak out her legs into the porch. She left it starving for several weeks outside to get hurt by other cats. And then by the time she let it back in, she just threw it out again, claiming that it had peed on the rug. The whole time she knew, she'd locked it in the bathroom without a litter box, so she was just looking for an excuse because she didn't even give the cat anywhere to go. Every time I think about that cat, I remember how it really drives me to never consider her any sort of a family again. I worked with a girl who scammed a guy for 10 grand in a green card marriage deal. She backed out as soon as he gave her the money. She had a teacup Pomeranian that her smack dealer baby daddy stole from someone's yard. Her grandfather leased a Kia for her, but after driving it for a few months, she felt the car was beneath her and just drove it back to the dealership and left it there. I noticed several times where she'd be talking to someone and her facial expressions and body language would be off, like the person would be telling a sad personal story and she'd be smiling about it. My older cousin went on a sobbing monologue about how he missed his late father in front of a group of people, and then as soon as they left, he said, "Well, he wasn't useful while he was alive, but damn if it isn't helpful now." They were a manager, and they laughed and said something like, "Best part of the job, that," after making a young female employee cry in a public meeting. More of a sociopath, but, you know. My old boss said this also. Someone would ask her if something was done, and she'd say, "Watch this," and yell across the room, "Hey you, get the boxes off the shelf." When the person moved to do the job, she'd laugh and say how much she loved watching her employees get stressed out by her. My cheating ex-girlfriend, who constantly accused me of cheating, punched me in the face while I was driving down the 405 freeway, then grabbed the steering wheel and tried to run us off the road. It started with another argument about accusing me of cheating because I worked 12-hour night shifts from 4 p.m. through 4 a.m. while going to college, and I just didn't have a lot of time to hang out with her. Then she called her mum crying and told her I was the one who tried to run us off the road. Her parents paid her half of the rent and her college tuition, but I had to work for mine. So while I worked my butt off paying for bills and college, she'd cheat on me and then scream at me and hit me over cheating on her as soon as I got home. The only reason she thought I was a cheater is because I'd get compliments from other girls in public while we were out together, and I'd occasionally stay at a male friend's house after she screamed at me and constantly hit me. I never once cheated. My conscience would never allow me to. You know, these stories are making me remember that attacking animals is textbook psychopathy, and god damn it, there are a lot of those psychotic motherfrickers out there. Well, we've had a lot of stories that we've actually had to skip because, as usual, I'm not sure we could get away with them, and they were brutal, believe me. That said, there really is a special place in heck for people who attack their household animals. I guess I can't put my finger on why it seems more horrific to me compared to the other scumbags, but I'm not alone in feeling that way. In my early teens, I went to a mini house party at one of my good friend's house. He had recently gotten a hamster who he loved dearly. One of the guys at the party took a cap full of vodka and got the hamster to drink it. It started convulsing and shaking while this guy laughed. The hamster passed away minutes later. I tried to grab his sweater collar and push him up a wall, and he swatted me away. Another friend later dated him for a few weeks. Ugh. My last boss, a property developer, once told me in a one-on-one chat that on the weekend he had been watching documentaries about the leader of the Third Reich to learn about leadership. You know, how to get people to do things, to motivate them. I wish to this day I'd had my phone on record. He also fired 40 people after COVID hit, and his personal assistant told me he bought a Rolls-Royce soon after. Last Friday of each month, he and his mistress, who also worked with us, would disappear for the afternoon. His assistant told me that was when they went to get Botox, laser treatments, and so on. I'm happy to say that now his business has gone under. Who I thought was my boyfriend was instead a married serial cheater. He had an affair baby. Meanwhile, his wife was battling cancer. His family helped him to cover up the existence of the baby. His best friend constantly cheats on his girlfriend, and they're going to get married soon. Devastating. My father-in-law was telling me about a kid he grew up with who he saw snap a dog's neck and throw it as a football for a joke. It was the serial killer Joseph Daniel Miller. 5th grade, I was at this girl's sleepover where she said her and her cousin found kittens and put them in a cooler and forgot about them. When they remembered to check the cooler, they'd unfortunately passed. And she laughed like it was the funniest thing ever. And that's when I no longer liked her. I don't think she understood that that was the reason I became distant from her at school. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I once had a conversation in a bar with someone that proceeded to tell me that he's thankful there's a law system that he can morally lean on, because he himself has no emotions or moral feelings and that he has a morbid curiosity and would otherwise probably kill someone. He also told me that he'd killed frogs when he was a kid and had cut those frogs open. He had this cold atmosphere around him, and it was so strange that he solely functioned mechanically within the help of a set of rules and the fear of being thrown into jail. I totally believed him that he'd murder. I got dizzy because of the creepy conversation and told him that I don't want anything to do with him, and I immediately left the bar. For weeks, I was looking over my shoulder when I walked out on the streets. I actually kinda respect the heck out of him for that. He knows he lacks empathy, conscience, and stuff, and instead of indulging in those darker impulses, he works within the framework of the law to try and be a functioning member of society. It has to be really hard being born without a fundamental part of what makes people feel human. He's impaired, but aware of all the ways that he falls short of being normal. The fact that he's at least trying to live a decent life despite having this huge deficit is really commendable in my opinion. I wouldn't want him as a friend either, but I appreciate his effort. When I was younger, my mentor told me a story about a guy who tried to corner her in her dorm at college about 10 years earlier. She had escaped and reported him only for the college to tell her that she could either press charges or they'd quietly remove him from the college. And they warned her that if she pressed charges, he wouldn't be expelled until the case was over. So she'd have to see him on campus, and then they even implied that she'd be responsible for subsequent attacks on the campus. She chose to remove him. It later transpired that he just left, so I suspect they pushed him out informally. At the time, it was just a cautionary tale from a mentor to a mentee about to go to college myself. Maybe a year after she told me that story, a girl disappeared in my state, and a man was arrested for her murder. Everyone in the state was talking about this case at the time. My mentor met up with me and told me it was this guy. The guy who'd tried to trap her in college. There was a month or two of limbo where the prosecutors weren't sure that he'd take the plea deal, and they thought she might have to testify, but he ended up agreeing to plead guilty. He's since been convicted on 2 murder cases and suspected of 9 more. I've taught a young girl who I suspect is a psychopath aged 4. Swearing, physical outbursts, biting, spitting, kicking, attacking others in class out of nowhere. She's tried to set fire to their house on numerous occasions, throws rocks at cars, strangled rabbits, ripped feathers from birds, and killed them too. An absolute unit. This was happening from before kindergarten age. Oof. She'd openly share how she was going to attack her family, deliberately playing far too rough with other kids, pushing them in front of cars and stuff. All avenues of help were useless. She'd attack adults too. She was declined schooling and health camps. The only option her mum had for help was to medicate her into a zombie-like state. The only explanation for her behaviors that we got was that her mum did substances while pregnant, and the child was just kinda wired wrong. Heartbreaking stuff despite numerous interventions. I'd expect that she'll murder someone before long and be institutionalized. She's 10 now and a major menace to authorities. When I worked at a gym, one of the fitness directors would constantly overcharge clients for training sessions just to hit sales numbers at the end of the month so that he could get his bonus. When clients would complain that they were double charged for that month, he'd tell them that it was an IT error, but he'd never fix it. He did this to a grandmother once and completely screwed over her finances for that entire month. She came in crying, and after she left, he just laughed and told the rest of us that she'll figure it out. He was an absolute scumbag, but got promoted after about half a year of doing this. When I was like 15, I went to a military camp and made friends with a girl there, and she was so cool and I really liked her until we were outside one day in the grass, and she caught a grasshopper or something, and she started just ripping its legs and arms off one at a time, and watching it struggle in between, and then chopping its body up with a twig, being like, "Yeah, fricker, yeah!" the whole time. I was immediately disgusted and weirded out. He knew what apartment building we were in, but not the apartment number. He had no phone, so he pulled the fire alarm and the building evacuated, where he met us in the parking lot. I mean, you almost have to applaud him for finding the most direct approach from not knowing your location to getting you to come outside and stand in front of him, if not for the disruptive and presumably expensive problem he caused you and literally everyone else in the building. Also, was this like your friend or something? Was he just trying to find you so you guys could play Mario Kart? Oof, I seem to attract psychopaths. Warning, there's a massive trauma dump to follow. My ex and his mother probably top the list. Where to even begin? He started out as the most charming, kind, loving, romantic, supportive person I'd ever met. As soon as we were living together, that charade ended. It got worse with time, but what I'm sharing here happened towards the end. My ex-mother-in-law said, "That was my drink," after her son knocked me to the ground and threw a drink in my face. That was after I'd picked her up on the way home from work. He was unemployed. Shocker, right? And I'd done this because I thought he wouldn't hit me if she was there. He'd tie our bedroom doorknob to our computer desk with string, making this complicated web at night to keep massively pregnant me from sneaking out to cheat on him at night. We lived in the boonies, by the way. Who I was cheating with was always up for debate. He seemed to think I was just eggplant-starved and roaming the wilderness, scavenging for any member I could find. Even though he made me do the deed with him every night, because he thought that if I didn't, that meant I'd done it with someone else already. Every day. It was humiliating, all of it. He'd accuse me of unraveling and then retying his ridiculous web every morning. Ludicrous behavior, I know, but also ludicrous that I persisted, because younger me just seemed to love to suffer. Also, while I was pregnant, he accused me of sneaking out a long rectangular window that was about 8 inches wide. Again, to cheat. After I had our son, I picked up any extra hours at work that I could, because I was the only one working. Unfortunately, my catering manager shorted me 4 hours one week. I talked to the manager before leaving, and they couldn't fix it until the next week's check. I knew I was screwed. My heart pounded the entire way home. We'd been kicked out of our place because he had picked fight after fight with our landlord. We were sleeping on his grandmother's living room floor at the time with a newborn. I thought maybe he'd not totally freak out because his grandma and mum would be there. I had to show him my check stub as soon as I got home because he kept track of my hours and they'd better match up. He didn't even give me the chance. He ripped my purse off my body as soon as I shut the front door behind me, took the check stub and threw the contents of my purse all over the room. My guess is they'd been arguing before I got home, and he needed a punching bag. He looked at it, and then, to spare you some details, things got pretty physical and nasty. I just crawled around sobbing, collecting my crap and thinking about how I'd never imagined being so low. His grandmother cried too. However, his mother stood over me holding my check stub in her hand and said, "You sure you didn't lie about your hours? You'd better just tell us the truth." She was the devil in human form, I swear. I used to just feel awful about some of the stories I heard about his upbringing, but it took me a very long time to realize he was an adult when we were together, and he knew what he was doing to me was wrong. He still took delight in doing it. He'd laugh while I cried, mock me, break my stuff, destroy my art. I couldn't talk to my family because he said they were helping me cheat on him. He made me cry every day for 2 solid years, made me doubt my own sanity, made me seriously contemplate just not being alive many times, encouraged it. The guy wrecked my psyche. All I can say to any person who seems to pick one butthole partner after another is get some freaking therapy ASAP and save yourself, because there's a legion of awful people like this guy looking for people with low self-esteem and trauma to take advantage of. Save yourself. This is all just a drop in the bucket of the hell he put me through. I lost everything because of him. It's been 15 years since I left him, and I'm only just starting to feel like myself again. It wasn't one thing, but the sum of things. Complete lack of true empathy, and the eerie way that they act like they have empathy in tragic situations. A ton of casual lies, an extremely charming front, the sudden violence, their sometimes dead eyes, the next level scheming to hurt people who threaten them, the lack of any guilt or shame, the enjoyment of confrontation, the easy moving on from one relationship to the next once people see past their facade, and their skills in manipulating those who don't know. Yeah, I know of a guy like this. Used to be mutual friends with him, although I always hated him for what he did to me. Sometime after years of no contact, he started texting me again and eventually even apologized for his past behavior. I threw out a little something about me having grown past that and how I'm strong enough to not get hurt by others anymore, including him. And wouldn't you know it, he just couldn't resist threatening me all over again. My sister would convince another addict that had a thing for her to inject into his neck and would promise him certain favors to do it. She wanted to see if it would kill him. She said he made the choice, so it's not her fault. My coworker was flexing about the amount of people he'd slept with to spread transmissible diseases and how easy it was to convince them to do it raw. I already thought he was, but I just read about RFK Jr. having cheated on his wife 37 times, journaled about it, and constantly sent friends pictures via text. When his wife found out, she threw up a noose and ended things. Look, he's already nuts, but I didn't realize he was legitimately that evil. And the saga continued. Look at the prolonged fight he had over her remains. My goodness.
People, what is your strangest glitch in the Matrix moment that cannot be explained? When my son was about 4 years old, one night he started hounding me to ring Nana. He had never asked to call her before, so I just put him off for an hour or so and he came back and insisted that I call her. Turns out she was sitting on her lounger experiencing a massive tachycardia event and couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance and met her at the hospital. The same week, she had a pacemaker and defibrillator unit implanted to fix the problems. To this day, I cannot explain what drove him to get me to call, but I'm very glad he did. He doesn't even remember it. I don't know why, for the life of me, but it just took me 20 times to clearly say he doesn't even remember it. This happened to people I know, not me directly. A woman who works with my mom was out doing her grocery shopping one night and ran into me at the supermarket. She told my mom about the encounter the next day and asked why I didn't recognize her, as we saw each other once every few weeks when I'd go and help with any heavy lifting at their store. My mom confirmed that it couldn't have been me as I was at home. The woman also mentioned feeling oddly nauseous during the interaction. I was about 16 or 17 at the time. Another woman I know said she didn't know I walked through the park near her home after work. Dumbfounded by her observation, I listened as she explained that she'd seen me every so often after work, walking briskly through a large park, which I do know of but have only driven past, as if I was exercising. She said I walked close by her the previous evening and she was going to speed up to catch up with me and say hello, but as she started to, she began to feel ill, so she slowed down and then sat on a bench for a few minutes. By then, she'd lost sight of me. This happened about 3 years ago and both occurrences were miles apart. I can't believe I forgot about this, but it happened when I was 20. I was living on campus on the ground floor of a 3-story building. There were only 36 people in the building, so I knew everyone by sight at least when this happened. A new guy moved into the 3rd floor. We'd exchanged pleasantries and I knew his name and what floor he lived on, but not much else. I was coming out of the front door one morning and he was coming down the stairs and said, "Oh, I just saw your sister going up the stairs." I asked him what he meant and he said, "Your sister? She's here all the time? She wears her hair the same as you?" I used to change my hair a lot. At the time, it was midway down my back and fire truck red. There was nobody on campus with hair like mine. I noped out and went back inside. You know, it might be hard to accept for some people, because I know we live in a time where everyone likes to think they're a special little snowflake, but some of us just have that face, that body, and even that sense of fashion. You just look like a lot of people. I stopped at a gas station on my way to work one morning. I take out my debit card and take my car keys with me and leave everything in the car. Pay for my stuff and throw my debit card in the metal cup I have in my car. Literally half a second later, I look down and my card is gone. Pulled apart everything trying to look for it and couldn't find it. I go to work and go home to find it sitting on my desk. Double check my bank account to make sure it was the card I used, and it was. To this day, I still have no idea what happened. I mean, I can't explain that either really, unless, you're a liar. Saw a dude with no face driving a car. No features at all. It was just blank. I did more than just glance at him. I was staring. Just smooth skin and a men's haircut. I've never told anyone because it's so ridiculous sounding and I don't think people would believe me. Probably a rational explanation for it, I suppose, but man, what the hell? Maybe some kind of prankster or whatever trying to freak people out or something, or maybe you were doing something you shouldn't have been doing while driving. I've posted this before, but my family go to a garden center near my town every winter. Pretty Christmas lights. Well, this one year, the day before we were supposed to go, I had a dream that on our way, the tire of the car came off and we crashed hard. It was such a horrible, graphic dream. My mom's leg had been crushed, my dad stuck, etc. Well, I told my mom in the morning and she joked that she'd checked the wheels. She actually must have. She said the car had felt weird and the dream unnerved her. Lo and behold, the tire is loose and needs to be taken to a mechanic. Really weird experience, especially as I've never had a dream feel so real before. Well, you know what they say, with great power comes great responsibility. Now come over to my house and dream up some winning lottery numbers if you would be so kind. Once I walked into my living room from the hallway, saw my mum in the kitchen pouring a bowl of something, fully clothed, important to the story, and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She ignored me, put something in the fridge, and walked into her room. I figured she didn't hear me and walked into my room. Not even 2 minutes later, she walked into my room, soaking wet, in a towel, and tells me she had fallen asleep in the bathtub and had just woken up. Weirdest crap ever. That sounds pretty believable, actually. Year 3 or 4 at school in the UK, so I'd have been like 7 or something. Anyway, at the end of school we all had to line up in our year groups in the yard and we would be led by our teacher to the front of the school and either onto the bus or picked up. The pathway from the back to the front of the school was narrow, so all single file. I was walking along, chatting and laughing with my peers in front and behind of me. Next thing I know, I'm stood on the path, completely alone. The teacher comes running back from around the front of the school and says, "Greg, hurry up, you'll miss the bus." I'd literally missed/skipped a few minutes of time. I've always remembered it. The answer is simple, my friend. We are nothing more than sleeping slaves. Diavolo is doing whatever he be doing in Italy and using King Crimson all over the goddamn place. But in all seriousness, this has happened to me as well. I've blanked out going from point A to B and had no recollection of my journey to point B. It's something that happens. People just go on automatic sometimes. But it certainly doesn't change how jarring it can be. Not the strangest, but the most recent. Early last month, I went online to pay a bill, like I've done for years. I get to the last page before finishing and the web page freaks out, with a multitude of display issues before finally receiving an error message. After several attempts to pay, I give up, assuming the site is having issues. I go back 2 days later and pay my bill, and it goes through normally, with me getting my usual text and email notifying me I paid. I'm very confused a few weeks later when I check my email and find a notice from the company whose bill I paid with a semi-threatening email saying the bill is due that day and do I need to set up a payment plan. I've been dealing with the company for almost a decade and have never been late in paying. I check my credit card account and there's no record of me paying, nor are the text or email I received still in my records. I pay the bill and chalk it up to a senior moment on my part. Last week I got my one credit card bill. It says I never paid my last bill, so now I've got that bill to pay plus the interest. I find my previous bill open but with the invoice in place in my living room. Here's why I'm posting. I'm physically disabled and can't drive, and I always pay that credit card bill in person after they messed up my payment years ago. A family member always takes me to my credit union to pay that bill, and like me, he remembers us going down to pay the bill. They say I never paid. He and I even remember a conversation we had on the way to the credit union and going grocery shopping afterwards, but yet the bill is unpaid and the bill is in my possession still. I don't know what to say except that credit card unions can be tricksy little rats. We'll call them rats. In my area, there are apiaries. An old girlfriend and I were driving down a backcountry road exploring the area, and we both saw an old lady in dark clothes tending to a few beehives in an open field not far from the road, maybe 50 yards or so from the road. She was covered in bees. I slowed down, the bees covered the woman, and then the bees all flew away and the lady was gone. There was nowhere she could have vanished to or hid, and we both saw it happen. Answer: that was no little old lady tending that beehive, that was the pain from Metal Gear Solid 3. When I was 23, I went to a week's workshop with uni abroad to Barcelona. The workshop was based in an obscure part of the city, and I always thought I'd never be able to find that area again. Fast forward about 15 years, I score a job in Barcelona. Get off the plane, go to the hotel near my new office, and it's across from said workshop. I worked there for 3 years, and when that job ends, I move country again for about 5 years. About a month ago, I was invited to an interview for a job, which I'm now in the process for, and guess where the offices are? Yep, around the corner from the workshop that I thought I'd never find again. It's got me wondering if it's coincidence or should I just move to that area until I work out why the universe keeps sending me there. This is probably my favorite one so far. The universe just sending you back to a specific place, like in another country regularly, is just kind of cool. Woke up one morning, went into the living room, and there was a pile of at least 100 maggots in the middle of the living room. Fat fuckers, too. No idea where they came from, or perhaps more disturbingly, what they had eaten to get that size. Well, that would certainly freak me the hell out if it was the first thing I woke up to in the morning. Wife and I were driving out of Texas to come back home to Ohio. We stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Kind of a run-down little place. Wife goes in while I'm filling up. I finish and pay at the pump and decide to head in and use the restroom real quick. I walk out and the wife is at the checkout paying. Wall up and the guy just starts looking at me and then calls me out by my full name. Lieutenant? Yeah? Your name is Lieutenant Drinks-A-Lot, right? Yeah. Do we know each other? Nope. Then how do you know my name? I don't know. Wife and I look at each other and we both get the hell out of there. I don't have a common name. I had never been to that gas station, let alone that town in Texas, ever. Every time my wife and I think about it, we can't explain it. Now, I've never worked a register, but I think that maybe when he paid to fill it up, it may have come up with his name if he paid by card at the pump, so the dude just took a shot in the dark and was like, oh, this is that dude. I don't know how he'd know that he's a lieutenant unless I know that you can get different titles on your debit and credit cards and whatnot, so I don't know if lieutenant is an option that you can have or something. It's the most rational explanation I can come up with, that's for sure.
After a bath, I went to put clothes on, blacked out and woke up on the floor, sitting upright against the sink and dressed. I have no idea what happened. I didn't feel sore anywhere like if I had fallen over, and it was as if I sat on the floor and dressed myself while I was unconscious. Felt like 20 minutes had passed, even though the bathroom still had steam in it. Kinda just shrugged it off, but I'll still think about it.
You probably just got up too fast, you silly cow. I'm not the kind of person to have a great many friends, but those friends I do keep are sacred to me. So one evening, I'm getting out of a Rotterdam subway to go to my apartment near there when I see an old friend, one I haven't seen in the flesh in a few years, heading into the subway. I call out his name. He turns, waves, and makes this call me gesture. Then the doors close and subway rides off. 30 seconds later, my phone rings. It was my friend who told me he'd just seen me getting the normal train he'd used to get home from the bar. Apparently, I had grinned, waved, gestured, call me, the doors shut, and the train drove off. I lived in Rotterdam, he lived in Enschede. Well, looks like more doppelganger shenanigans are afoot. In high school, I remember going to English and the teacher did roll call. She called my name and I raised my hand and said, I'm here. Then she stopped, saying, so he's not here then. My friend and I laughed because I was obviously here. Figured she was messing with me. That night, my mom got a call telling her I wasn't at class today. I was actually marked as absent. I go back to school the next day and tell my friend, Mrs. English teacher actually freaking counted me as absent. And he said, why wouldn't she? Thought to myself, you're not funny. But I just let it slide because I thought again I was being messed with. Then one of my friends sits down and asks, you feeling better today? Or were you just playing hooky? I was so confused. Then I go to my first hour and that teacher hands me the work I supposedly missed from that day. I looked in my bag and had the same stuff, guide and assignments already there. To this day. I don't know if I missed that day of school or not. I like to think that the teacher and the students, your friends, were conspiring against you to mess with you really badly. About a couple years ago, a friend sent me a video and he asked if I had a lost twin somewhere. It was a video made by amateur actors from the city I used to live in. There was this girl that looks just like me. She talked just like me and her part on the sketch consisted of telling a joke I used to tell at the time. I was freaked out of my mind. For some stupid reason I deleted that video and I haven't been able to find it anywhere. And God knows I spent an embarrassing number of hours trying to confirm it even existed in the first place. I kept this one in just as an example of a stupid one that I absolutely don't believe. And believe me, there are already a few that I'm like, very skeptical of, but some of them are pretty cool. Senior year of high school, 30-minute lunch. My buddy and I drove all the way from my school to McDonald's, normally about a 10-minute drive, so 20 minutes minimum there and back. But we stopped by my house in between the school and McDonald's. I grab a shirt, change, leave, drive down the street, get into an altercation with a guy who we flipped off for tailgating. A shooty bang bang is pulled. We think he was across the street. Looked like a shooty bang bang, but who knows? His wife in the passenger seat starts yelling at him. We part ways. Go to McDonald's and order food, eat in the parking lot, decide we are late regardless. We had no access to the time in my car and our phones were in our lockers at school. We also were frequent ditchies or tardy kids. Turns out this all occurred in 18 minutes on the dot. It's freaking impossible, but it happened. My buddy and I still talk about it to this day, saying we went through a wormhole or some crap. Or my Nissan, rest in peace, somehow could time travel or slow down time. Time-traveling Nissan is not nearly as cool as a time-traveling DeLorean. I was at a gas station getting a coffee. I absolutely love gas station coffee, and this was somewhere I always stop before heading to work. I went to pay for my coffee and I tap my card. The lady at the till tells me it was declined. I try inserting it with my PIN because maybe my tap wasn't working. The lady said it was declined again. There was no one else in the gas station at that time, so I'm like, hold up, let me check my online banking. Because I'd just gotten paid and I knew I had money. I go to my online banking and it says that I paid. I show her the transaction and she starts insisting insisting that it didn't go through on her end. Like, okay lady, I'm not paying for the same coffee twice. Next day, I go in to grab another coffee and the lady tells me that I stole the coffee the other night, but doesn't make me pay for it. I am angry because I just got a lecture when I know the money for the coffee came out of my account. I checked my online banking later and there was no transaction for the coffee. Not so much a glitch in reality as it is a glitch in your bank account. Biking back from school one day with a friend and we were talking when suddenly I got a really strange case of déjà vu. I remembered the exact moment as if it had happened once before and knew what he was going to say next. Then he said it. Nothing mind-blowing, but more than 14 years later, I still can't explain it. See, I would explain that by saying that the friend was probably talking about something that you were only passively listening to before, but now that you were actually focused and subconsciously aware of what they were talking about before, you kind of knew what they were going to say next. This happened to me several years ago while I was living in California and working a great job in a downtown coffee house. I loved everything about that job. I worked with fantastic people and our shop was located in the city's historic district in a very old, very beautiful building that had once been a hotel in the 1800s, but had since been converted into apartments, lofts, and of course, the big coffee house on the main floor. Being an early birdie and living only a couple blocks away from the coffee house, I was always scheduled to work the opening shift, which started at 4:15 a.m. It was the most unpopular shift, but it happened to be my absolute favorite one because I loved walking to work in the quiet of the early mornings as the rest of the city was sound asleep. Normally, downtown was quite loud and busy, full of people and constant activity, but in the early hours of the morning, it was still and silent, and I felt as if I was the only person in existence walking through a ghost town. Every day, I arrived 10 or 15 minutes early for my shift and would wait for my manager on the patio outside of the shop. It was always just the two of us working that early shift, and my manager was often running a little bit behind and never arrived before I did. But I didn't mind at all. I liked to spend some time by myself on the patio outside of the darkened shop, gathering my thoughts while I waited for him to walk up with his keys to unlock the door. One morning as I was walking to work and approaching our building, I noticed that the coffee house was brightly lit up as all the lights were already turned on and shining through the store's giant glass windows. I was about 10 minutes early that morning, so I was very surprised to see that my manager had arrived before me and had already started opening up the shop. I walked up to the glass door and pulled on the handle to let myself in, only to find that it was locked shut. That wasn't really unusual, as we often kept the doors of the employee entrance and main entrance locked while we got everything ready for the day and went through our morning procedures until 5 a.m., which was our official opening time. What was unusual, though, was the sound of music I could clearly hear drifting through the speakers inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day, but on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day, but we never turned it on until around 9 or so in the morning, out of respect for all of the tenants living in the apartment above us. But on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. I thought it was odd, but decided that maybe my manager was just feeling extra festive that day and wanted to listen to some tunes while we worked. I knocked on the employee's entrance door and waited for my manager to come and let me in. I looked through the glass and watched for him. He didn't come, so I knocked again and waited some more. He still didn't appear, so I knocked again and again. I then walked to the main entrance door and tried knocking on those with no luck. I checked my watch and saw that I had 5 minutes until I needed to clock in. I knocked again, much louder this time, and looked inside through the glass door for any signs of my manager. And that's when I heard the muffled sound of voices coming from the back of the store where the kitchen of our coffee shop was located. At that quiet, early hour in the morning, every sound seems to be amplified, and what I could distinctly hear was two male voices talking and laughing together. That was very unusual, as I had mentioned before that it was normally just me and my manager who opened up the shop. But I figured someone had probably just needed to pick up an extra shift. I knocked yet again and continued to listen to the sounds coming from the coffee shop. The men kept talking and laughing loudly. They seemed to be having a really great time. In addition to the music and the talking and the laughter, I began to hear the sound of clanging dishes and also the sprayer of the 3-compartment steel kitchen sink being turned on and off, which was very, very unusual, as there would be no dishes to wash before the store had even opened. I was also confused as to why the manager and whoever was with him were in the kitchen in the back of the store, because so much of our opening procedures, setting up the pastry cases, brewing the coffee, preparing everything for the espresso machine, were done at the front of the store, where I was waiting to be let inside. At this point, I was getting a bit irritated, as I was supposed to start work in just a few minutes, and I needed to punch in on our time clock. I hated clocking in late for work. I dug out my phone and dialed my manager's cell number. He didn't pick up, so I dialed the number to our coffee shop instead, and the two phones inside the shop, one in the back office and one up the front by the register, started ringing. Once, twice, 3 rings and no answer. Now 4 rings and 5. I hung up and I immediately dialed again, annoyed that they were making such a racket in there with the music and all the talking and the laughter that they probably couldn't even hear the phone at all. Just as before, nobody answered. I hung up and redialed the store for a 3rd time. The phone rang and went unanswered, and so I banged on the door yet again to no avail. I looked at my watch, and I was officially late for work. As I was standing in the front of the locked door with my phone against my ear, becoming more and more irritated, I noticed a pair of headlights reflecting in the glass rolling up behind me. I turned around and saw something I did not expect at all. It was my manager. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said as he climbed out of the driver's seat and shut his car door and hustled up to the shop's entrance. "I tried to get here as fast as I could," he said as he moved towards me and fumbled with his keys trying to find the one to the shop door. "You're mad," he said. "I can tell. I'm really sorry." Completely confused, I put my phone away and turned to head into the store with him, and that's when I lost my breath for a minute. The coffee shop was totally dark. None of the lights were on, not a single light, and it was dead quiet. The Christmas music had stopped, and so had the voices and laughter. All of the loud noise had disappeared. Every sound I had been listening to just seconds before had suddenly vanished. "I promise I'll be here on time tomorrow," my manager said as he fits his key into the lock. "I'll even be early. You'll be shocked." Little did he know that I could not possibly be more shocked to see him than I was at that very moment, as he opened the door to the silent, completely empty coffee house. Perhaps another individual with a deep love for creative writing. Men, what's the most creepy thing a woman has ever done to you? Enraged in the middle of the argument, she took my fish out of the aquarium and threatened to step on it. I saved the little guy. It was a beta, if you want to know. Takes anger out on small creatures. That right there, my friend, is a red flag. Cut off all of her pubic hair, put them in between layers of scotch tape, crammed them in an envelope with a pair of her used panties, and put the envelope under my windshield wiper. There was a note that read something like, "I know we can't be together, but now you'll always remember me." She was right. It's already been stated what she was trying to accomplish. I just can't fathom as to why she came up with that. Probably not as exciting as most here, but still super frickin' weird. I was staying at my friend's house, sleeping in his guest room. Friend is at work, his girlfriend is at home. One thing about this room is that it has a very heavy door that has to be held open by something super heavy or else it slams shut. Well, I sleep with the door closed. I wake up in the morning, and as I do every morning, I laid there for a bit longer before actually getting out of bed. Well, this time, all of a sudden, I see the door open, the light is still off, but the hallway light being on means I can see if someone's standing in the doorway. I have my eyes kind of opened and I can see that she's just standing there in the doorway, staring at me. I didn't move. I wanted to see what the hell would happen because this was thoroughly freaking me out. She just stood there for at least 10 minutes, didn't look away, didn't walk around the room. I was laying at a weird angle where I could see her perfectly. She could see me, but she couldn't see that my eyes were half open. I thought she may have been in there to grab something because there's a bunch of stuff in the closet, clothes and such. Nope. 10 minutes I waited for her to do something or to walk out. Finally, I flinched and feigned waking up, and I heard her run out and slam the door. I got up, went to the kitchen, and she was as bubbly as could be, acting like nothing happened, acting like she didn't just spend 10 minutes watching me sleep. I kind of think if you were just laying there watching her, watching you for like 10 minutes, if that was even as long as it happened for, I think you were hoping for something to happen. I would have just said, "Hey, why are you staring at me? Can I help you? Do you want something?" Dated this girl who I later found out to be literally a compulsive liar and also into witchcraft. After not being able to deal with her insanity anymore, I broke things off. She would wait outside my door for God knows how long until I came home and say she left something at my house. This happened a lot. One day, I was going to add a new email account to my phone and realized that her email account was still saved on my phone. I shouldn't have checked it, but she was actively stalking me and I needed to know what I was up against. There were tons of emails to some witchcraft lady she found online somehow. All about me. She was paying this internet witch like hundreds of dollars an hour for what I would consider witch consulting. It was all about me. How to cast spells to get me back, how to enchant me, how to curse my new GF, all kinds of crazy crap. She was using this lady as like a weird therapist almost, asking her a bunch of relationship questions too. This went on for months. The witch lady was getting a little annoyed at her, I could feel, although she couldn't complain that much because she was draining her for literally thousands of dollars. She told the witch that at some point I told her that she needs to seek professional help. The witch actually told her that might not be a bad idea. She ended up moving into the house of a mutual friend, this girl from school that was literally one building away from mine. My friend told me that she was always burning weird spices and candles. It was at the direction of the witch, actually. It was creepy as hell, and eventually she cut my brakes. I'm reminded of this time I saw that some witches were trying to spiritually take down Allah or something and needed like a lot of witch power to be able to defeat him. Because, Allah is just so spiritually powerful. You need as many witches as you can get. But also, yeah, she pretty cray-cray. I fell asleep sitting next to one of my friends on the way home from a school trip in 12th grade. I woke up to her using my hand to play with herself. As I began to regain consciousness, she threw my hand at me and made a huge scene about it. I never talked to her about it. It bothers me to this day. Definitely top 3. Say what? That's gotta be considered assault on some degree. What the figgity yuck? Girl I had seen for 2 dates had her best friend SMS me anonymously claiming we went in a bar the night before and offering to come over to my place. I rarely went to bars as I worked night shift at the time, so I knew I hadn't met anyone at a bar. Eventually, after probing and pushing, I got the girl to confess. She said she was just testing to make sure I was trustworthy. Didn't see her again. I understand the need, the want, the desire for a trustworthy man in your life, but goddamn, there are better ways to go about it than that. Smarter ways, even. Met a girl at a bar and we ended up back at her place. We fooled around and fell asleep. She seemed normal all night and I saw no red flags at all. I definitely would have dated her again, until she went crazy. I woke up at around 5 a.m. and started getting dressed to leave. I had to get home and get ready for work. She woke up while I was dressing and totally freaked out. She was screaming angrily, "You can't leave!" I explained I needed to go to work and that I'd call her later. She was having none of that. Then she attacked. I literally had to physically fight my way out of her apartment with a few scratches on my arm for souvenirs. I have no idea what her deal was, and I never went back to the bar I met her in. What's the problem, girl? He said he'd call you back. I mean, I guess there's a chance that he's lying, but, what the hell? This happened to a buddy of mine, except she threatened to call the police and say that he raped her if he didn't stay. He nervously left the apartment. She called the cops and pressed charges. He lost his job, his sanity, everything. She eventually admitted nothing happened, yet his life was already crumbled into pieces and his reputation ruined. She never suffered any consequences. Be careful out there. It's sad but true, yeah. Some women will do you like that. A girl broke into my house 3 times in a week while I was rehearsing, Celeste. Each time she left money to repair the window, a large bag of Twizzlers, and 2 cans of tuna for my cat. That was it. We had never been romantically or physically involved. We barely even knew each other. This oddly sounds to me like the modern version of the humble beginnings of a festive or cultural celebration of some sort. Once a year, around the globe, women break into men's apartments and leave Twizzlers and cat food, whether they have a cat or not. That'd be crazy. Really drunk chick asked me to dance and proceeded to keep trying to pull my willy out, like forcefully. When I'd finally resisted enough, she called me a nerd and stormed off. You're not a nerd, buddy. You're a survivor. I was probably 9. It was after church service and there's this new lady there who took a liking to me. She was the new wife of the minister. We were outside waiting for the grown-ups to come out. I think they were having a meeting inside. And this new lady took me to a bench nearby. We sat, asked me lots of questions. Then she put my head on her lap, stroked my hair while humming a lullaby like I'm a baby. It felt really uncomfortable and I really wanted to escape. But I was a shy little boy and didn't want to offend her or something. So my sister from afar snickering at us. It went on like this for 30 minutes, but felt like hours. I was dying with cringe inside. If I were that child's sister, there'd be a point if it really went on for 30 minutes, which I highly doubt this woman sat there on a bench and stroked this random child's head for 30 minutes unless she really is a little bit unstable. But there'd be a point where you're kinda concerned, right? Weird. I had a similar experience when I was younger that your story made me rethink. I lived in a neighborhood with middle-class housing. I had a friend whose parents were divorced, so his mother lived right down the street from me, and when he wasn't with his father in Hawaii, he was with her. So I was young, like 10 or 11 years old. My friend was with his father at the time, so he was not there. I was walking home, and when I was walking past his house, his mother was outside sitting in front of her garage smoking a cigarette. It was odd since we never really spoke other than standard pleasantries. I was respectful, as you should be. She made me sit on her lap while she talked, and she, for whatever reason, kissed my cheek multiple times with her arm around me. I know, sounds hentai AF, but I can assure you this happened. I can't for the life of me remember what she was saying since I was a kid that was only focused on getting home. She had red lipstick on, which was now on my skin, of course. Moving along, after a while, she let me go and I walked home where my mom prepared me a bath. She asked me about the lipstick and I told her what happened. She didn't react much, but thinking in hindsight, she may have freaked out. Nothing happened after that, and I was a very optimistic child who didn't think much of it. I think that she was lonely without her son. She lived alone, and I don't recall her having visitors. Just thinking as a parent in 2020, having your 10-year-old son come home with lipstick on his cheek would be a huge yikes. Yeah, that one's just a tad bit sketchy in my opinion. Met a girl at a party. We flirted, then we ended up in my bedroom. This was in my apartment. Heavy makeout. I suggest having intercourse. She declines. Heavier making out, basically including anything that's not intercourse. I suggest having intercourse again. She declines. Fair enough. We stopped the making out and planned to see each other again. The day we were supposed to meet, she stood me up. I had cooked and it was already time to meet. She told me that she doesn't want to see me again because I wasn't pushy enough. She liked men who are less soft and gentle. She basically told me that when she said no, I shouldn't have listened. Good riddance, I say. I don't care if a woman means yes when she says no. I take out a dictionary and I show her the meaning of no because that's what she said. Plus, in this day and age, how can you not be absolutely paranoid all the time that people are recording conversations to use in future courts of law or something? Keep in mind I'm only a junior in high school. I was about in 7th or 8th grade and I was at a New Year's party at my grandparents' house with all of their friends. You can tell I'm a party animal spending my New Year's with 60 and 70-year-olds, and one of their friends who I'd known for a while continued touching me and grabbing me in my waist and thigh region. She would sneak it in under the table or walking past each other or whatever. I totally understand the stereotypical grandma cheek pinch or whatever, but this was something else. After squeezing my butt with both hands, I had enough and said something to her. The rest of the night was super awkward, but the worst part was my grandma was defending her and downplaying the whole situation. It wasn't until I told my mom the next day she lost her temper on my grandma that she finally admitted she was wrong, and I haven't seen her since. For clarification, the person they haven't seen since is the groper. Well, here goes. I'm in high school and we're having PE. A girl that I hardly know asks me, "Hey, you want to see my butt?" And I say, no. She then proceeds to pull her whole pants down right in front of 30-odd students and the PE teacher. Everyone was just like, WTF, and she just pulls them back up and walks away like nothing happened. Someone I worked with sniffed the inside of my jacket that I forgot to bring with me. Later, she gave me a date with her as a wedding gift, only to be used before the wedding, and asked me if I was truly happy on my wedding day. Some people really do choose to strike at the worst or weirdest times, don't they? Older woman was cutting my hair. She was 60, I was about 24. She rambled on about how she loves bearded men and I might be old, but I can still look at the menu. She then told me about how she likes to go to clubs with her son in his 40s because she's his wingman and likes younger men. While this was happening, she kept running her hands down the front of my shirt. I later brought it up to the other employees there, who just laughed it off and said, "Oh yeah, that's just her. Apparently sexual assault is just part of her personality." The compliments didn't bother me too much until she started getting handsy. I'm fine with a bit of light flirting, but I'll admit if I had to sit through an entire haircut with this woman, I'd probably be like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a different chair. Woman I was engaged to was doing all the prep for the wedding. This was in her country and I didn't understand the language all that well, so I was a bit limited on how much I could help her out, other than helping to cut the invite cards out, etc. She was a very hot-tempered person as she was, but as much as I asked her what tasks I could help out with, she just refused to involve me in anything at all, and then complained that I wasn't helping enough. She argued and argued with me about how I didn't care despite my efforts to be involved in all the prep. It was all very manipulative. Eventually, she actually pulled a knife out at me. I slapped it off her wrist and she stormed off. When she left for work the next day, I packed my bags, took a taxi to the airport, and noped out of there. I'm picturing this woman coming back from work and being like, "Why has my fiancé left me? It couldn't possibly be because I pulled a knife on him." Wearing my sports jacket when I went to grab a fast food order. Some woman I've never seen before shouted hi and waved at me like we were best friends. Gave an awkward, confused wave back and left with my food. A couple hours later, I get a friend request on Facebook from someone I recognized as her. Best guess is she saw my jacket and stalked the sports roster to find my name and added me from that. Got blocked real quick. That or on a first date, she asked, "If you were going to kill me, how would you do it? I know how I would kill you." Then proceeded to tell me her plan on how she would kill me and get away with it. I don't know, sounds kinda hot if you ask me.
Oh yeah, baby, why don't you tell me again how you're gonna murder me in my sleep and get away with it?
Asked me if I had feelings for her the day before her wedding, which I was in. Then after being married insisted that we talk, and was trying to sit on my lap at a party when we were both drunk, and I told her it could wait until the morning. She revealed in the morning that she had cut herself after I wouldn't talk with her. I told her we couldn't be friends, and she texted me every day for 6 months without me responding until I learned how to block her number. A mutual friend told me she asked for my number from him this last summer. I haven't spoken to her for 10 years, so there's that. This woman is either down bad or she wants problems all the time. Back when I was working overnights at a national pharmacy chain, there was an older lady in her 50s that would pick up prescriptions and try to hit on me a few times. The most direct and creepiest thing she said to me was, "I don't know why women who go for younger men are called cougars. I like to be called a python because I like to ensnare young men. Do you like pythons?" Luckily, I was saved by a customer that promptly needed something picked up, and I ignored her until she left. I don't know why this just reminded me of an interaction I had at a bar where this older woman approached me, started talking to me, went, "Oh, drinking on a school night, are we, young man?" And I looked her dead in the eye and went, "Madam, I am 25 years old. I haven't been to school in like 7 years." When I was 17 eating a slice of pizza in a pizzeria in New York, I was sitting facing the glass looking out to the street. Time was around 7 p.m. It was getting dark. I'll never forget this 50-something-year-old lady was walking on the sidewalk, saw me eating, slowed down, stared straight at me with the most seductive grin and then winked. Then continued on walking. Until that point in my life, I had never felt so many emotions at once. I was turned on, weirded out, intrigued, scared. This was a day I will never forget. She had black hair and was pretty hot. This one's rather nice, no invasion of someone's personal space or anything like that, just a little smile and a wink. I had a girlfriend once that was really possessive, to the point of stalker behavior. We had been dating for maybe 3 months and she didn't have a life. She never did anything and always wanted to spend time with me, and I was a fairly busy person. It gets to the point where she doesn't believe that I could have so much going on in my life that I can't video call her for at least an hour at the start and end of every single day. If I wasn't replying to her messages within 5 minutes, she'd send about 7 more, then call me a few times. Then it got to the point that she looked at all my social profiles to see when I was last online to see whether I should have seen her texts or not. Also, within 2 weeks, she had planned our wedding and named our 4 children Max, Harrison, Lily, and Sophia. Went downtown to CVS to get my dad's medication at like 9 at night. While waiting for the cashier to come back, 2 old women in line made conversation with me. Unprompted, they started feeling on my shoulders and arms. Pulled the "I have a girlfriend" lie while trying to be nice so no trouble would happen. Inside, I was extremely creeped out. As if she had a sixth sense, the cashier reappeared out of nowhere so I could pay and leave, giving the 2 women a glare in the meantime. They gave my biceps a squeeze before leaving me alone. Felt so dirty. I took a shower after I got home. Next time I saw that cashier, I thanked her. "No problem," she said. Gave her a tip. For those asking, no, nothing progressed. The cashier had an engagement ring on her finger. Were some people hoping for a surprise love story? Maybe not the worst, but here's something. I was in a really low mental state due to some past trauma and recent health issues when we started dating, which I think was part of the appeal for her. Since looking back, the whole thing was very predatory. Iffy age gap, 24M and 32F. She started talking shared finances just a month or so into the dating. It's pretty obvious what she was about in hindsight. Anyway, she encouraged me to start keeping a journal to help with my mental recovery. What a twist. For the journal, she would ask questions and I would write answers to them, which she would read. Most of it was extremely personal. A good amount also sensitive, sexual information. I too am boggled that I went along with this. She was also doing classic abuser things, trying to cut me off from my best friends and all. Fortunately, it only took a few months for me to start seeing clearly, though I wasn't quite committed to breaking up. She must have sensed some resistance though. One day she asked for my journal, set it aside, then proceeded to start the breakup talk. I agreed that it wasn't working out for me either, and overall it was very amicable until I asked for my journal back, literally instant screaming that it belonged to her. I just stayed seated and kept repeating that she hadn't written a thing in it and I was the one who originally purchased it. She tossed it at me after a bit and I bounced out of there like a bat out of hell. She did send an apology about it over social media private messaging some years later, but it was also while letting me know that she would be attending kink meetups in my city though, so yeah, I gotta agree that entire relationship sounded sus as all get out.
Was it work late upgrading PCs to Windows 10? I'm happily married and had only recently gotten married at the time. While I was in the contact center upgrading multiple PCs, I was kind of cornered by a young woman who wound up saying, "If you ever need a release from your wife, I'm here and more than happy to, mess around or something. I think you're super attractive." And it kept going for a few minutes. I mentioned that I'm happily married with no intentions of cheating and she kind of pushed for a while longer, lingered while I kept working, and then eventually left. It was probably the most awkward 20 minutes I have ever sat through at work.
Hey, some women can't take no for an answer, and some of those women have never learned that patience is a virtue. But hey, good on you for not cheating on your wife. While I was at a rave, I had this girl walk up to me like the living dead while I was in a conversation with a bunch of people. This jaw swinger stops dead in front of me and says, "What's that?" and proceeds to grab me by the banger and beans with all the strength a turned-up 20-year-old can muster. I told her to get her frickin' hands off my junk and she scuttled away like Gollum being separated from his precious. About 10 minutes later, a friend taps me on the shoulder, points behind me, looking concerned, and tells me to look. There are 3 cops with a canine and a crying, crazy harlot claiming I tried to grape her. They were ready to frickin' destroy me without so much as a hint of proof. If I wasn't with so many people all night, most of which were young ladies there to back my story up, well, I'm pretty sure that nutbag could have ruined my life very easily. So, suddenly and inappropriately grabs a man by his banger and beans and then proceeds to accuse him of grape? What a cow. Played an MMO for a while where you could join 5 guilds. This lady was in 3 of them, was always nice but very flirty with me. Our guilds used TeamSpeak a lot and the 2 of us got to talking. Turns out though, we lived a few hundred miles and an international border away. We shared a crap ton of interests. She claimed to be in her 20s. I was over 30 at the time. We became friends, though she made it very clear to everyone that she wanted more. In fact, she referred to me as her nickname I went by in that game, and I found out that she was going to be traveling to an area near me right around my birthday. So I offered to meet her in a public setting. That's when she dropped it on me. She wasn't really in her 20s, she was turning 16. Technically over the age of consent, but yeah, still a kid. Even if there weren't legal issues, I simply was not interested in dating anyone that young. I have a 5-year rule. I only date people that are within 5 years of me. So I had a long talk with her. I explained to her that I was damn near twice her age, and while her interest in me was flattering, I wasn't interested. She was devastated, crying, telling me I was making a mistake because she would be the best girlfriend/future wife possible. That age was just a number. Finally, I told her that in 2 years when she turned 18 and brought proof of that, I would consider going on a single date with her if she was really that serious, and that if all went well, I would consider making an exception to my 5-year rule. But under absolutely no circumstances would I ever date or even meet with someone that was under 18. She wasn't happy, but eventually accepted that was the best she would get, and we stayed in touch even after I left the game. Fast forward almost but not quite 2 years, she has finally found a boyfriend. She hits me up on TeamSpeak. She wants me to travel up there to meet them because in her words, she wants me to know exactly what the hell I missed out on by unfairly and unreasonably turning her down. Age is just a number and shouldn't have gotten in the way. She has since become more normal, but yeah, those 2 incidents really creeped me out. No, I have never dated her. I had dated other women I had met in games before then, never have since. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, potential neckbeard and World of Warcraft player. I don't know if you can join 5 guilds in World of Warcraft. If anyone can guess what the game he was playing was, I'd love to know. Girls, how do you know when a guy is genuinely good and not just trying to get into your pants? I used to think that I was kind of obligated to have sex with my boyfriends when they wanted it just because that was what you did in order to be a good girlfriend. A few of my exes expected sex, so I just complied, even if I wasn't feeling well or was tired or whatever. One day, I was really sick and my current boyfriend was helping me out. I told him that I felt really bad, but I just didn't think I could have sex that night. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I don't need to have sex with you to love you." I learned a lesson that night about what a good man is. Remember, people, you do not have a right to sex. It is simply a privilege. When he does a nice thing, then doesn't make a big deal out of it because he's doing it for the sake of being a good person, rather than hoping to get something extra out of it. Like if someone gives you a lift home and doesn't mention it ever again, except to accept or reject monetary payment. Nice guys, trademark, will give a lift home and then not let you out of the frickin' car afterwards saying, "Wow, that was a really nice thing I did for you. What are you going to do for me?" I've never really liked the nice guy moniker. I know where it comes from. I get it, the whole like, "I'm such a nice guy, why does no one want to date me?" So why don't we just, scrap the nice guy moniker and call them what they really are, sexual opportunists. The night I knew I'd marry my husband was before we even started dating. I knew he'd been interested for a few months, but I wasn't available and he respected that. Never pushed boundaries I had set. One night, I was working a late shift and got ready to leave at about 10 p.m. I'd been dropped off earlier in the afternoon because my dumb butt forgot to put gas in my car, so it was sitting on the side of the freeway about half an hour drive away. I called my ride multiple times, nothing. I called my roommate, nothing. Called my friend that lived in the same town, nothing. I sent out texts, and after half an hour, no replies. I knew my co-worker, now husband, lived in a town between where we worked and where I lived. I decided to call up a guy I barely knew outside of work and hope he was as kind as he seemed to be. 15 minutes later, he was picking me up. Of course, I was embarrassed and beside myself that no one had answered my calls and texts. He drove me to the nearest 24-hour store, bought a gas jug, drove to a gas station, went in to pay for the gas, came out with a cup of coffee too. It was just turning cold out. Drove me back to my car, got me squared away and followed me back to the same gas station so I could fill up in case something went wrong. Y'all, I had plenty of money, I'm just forgetful. I stated this multiple times throughout the night. He just kept saying, "You've had a long day, let me help." We get to the gas station, he fills up my tank and came back out with a pack of the brand of cigarettes I smoked at the time. Neither of us smoke anymore, but that was part of how we bonded starting out. Me, you didn't have to do that. Him, you said you were out. Me, I can buy a pack in the morning. You keep 'em. Him, you know I don't smoke this brand. And hands them to me. We're standing there, having a smoke, wrapping up the night, and I just start tearing up and tell him, "I'm glad you exist." That's been something we repeat to each other now and then to this day. He never brought it up after that, except years later to tell me how angry he was that no one came to get me, and to confess that no one had ever told him they were happy he existed, and that he was happy he hadn't decided to drink that night like he normally would have. I wish someone told me they were happy I existed. But seriously, that's just beautiful. Just beautiful. If he remembers little details about you, like your dog's name or your sister's job, i.e. he actually pays attention when you talk. If he remembers the answer you gave when he asked, "What's up?" by following up with, "Oh, how did insert thing you did here go?" If he makes an effort to talk to you instead of just bugging you to hang out with him. If he doesn't constantly try to steer conversations towards flirting/sexual comments. If he's perfectly fine with you not being able to hang out if stuff comes up. Those are some of the things I look for, but then again, I've been fooled before. Trust your gut too. It's unrealistic to expect a guy to remember every little thing about you, but if he recalls something small, it proves he was paying attention. There are other ways guys can show this, like by asking more specific questions and remembering general facts about your life. If a guy puts effort into knowing you, he's genuine. Yeah, that's solid advice. Or, more probably, he's trying to steal your skin so he can insert himself into your life seamlessly by knowing everything about you, and then everyone grows to love him more than you, and he's some kind of superior version of you, like that run of Spider-Man where Dr. Octopus stole Spider-Man's body and became the superior Spider-Man, and then Peter Parker eventually got his body back, but that won't happen for you! Respect your boundaries. It wasn't until my current BF that I realized my feelings of feeling weirded out by all the guys before him was justified. They always pushed when I expressed hesitation or discomfort. I told my BF I wasn't ready, and he didn't make a move again for another 2 months until I was ready and initiated myself. Well, that certainly sounds like a long time in my unga bunga boy brain. I agree that boundaries should be respected. If you think the girl's worth waiting for 2 months, and by God, you respect that 2 months and you wait. I knew my husband was a keeper. He had been my friend first, but we lost contact because he had a crazy girlfriend. When we reconnected, she was officially his ex-girlfriend, but I had an emotionally abusive fiancé. He talked me out of it. He helped me get the courage to leave, and then he waited for me to heal. I gave him no time frame. I told him that I needed to be single before I made another commitment because he deserved to have all of me and be more than a rebound. Neither of us saw other people. We talked every day. I told him he didn't have to wait, but he insisted. When we saw each other again for the first time, he was an OTR truck driver. It clicked. We were meant to be. He switched to regional driver, I went back to college, and now we're building our lives. 7 years together, 4 married. That was nice. Easy. They treat you the same when the passion starts to decline and you are no longer tearing each other's clothes off. I know that makes my relationship sound bad, but long-term relationships go through these phases. When both parties are tired, stressed, etc., if your man stands by you, then he's a keeper. Short-term, I suppose, just wait until you know them before you sleep with them. That's not something I have been good at, though. I suppose just don't get emotionally invested in something that has not been properly defined. More solid advice. I like it. When my BF and I first got together, we were still teenagers. I got really drunk at a party and my friend bailed on me. I didn't have a ride or place to sleep that night. He took me to his house, brought me glasses of water and snacks, and didn't make a move on me all night, even when I slept in his bed in my underwear. We've been together for 4 years now. That's nice, even sweet, I might say, but also a pretty low bar to hold. Nice guys are nice to you. Nice guys are nice to people they don't want to get anything out of. I also have a theory that nice guys, in the you should have sex with me, I'm a nice guy sense, don't realize that being nice is the bare minimum, and thus you have to bring something else to the table. Be funny, be smart, be interesting. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some appeal in aesthetic, but don't claim nice like that's an achievement. You're supposed to be nice. Bragging about it is a sign that you don't understand that, and it's a pretty good indication that it's not genuine. I'll admit, sometimes I think a lot of people just get that impression of like, this is how a girl will like me by watching, like, I don't know, those really typical anime where a guy is just like, the bare minimum of nice to someone or kind in some small way, and the girl's like, no other guy's ever been like this before. Newsflash, boys, a majority of men in the world are not scumbags or total pieces of crap, and there is some solid competition out there. And if you want to compete, well, guess what? Self-improvement of the body and mind is necessary. You can never know, and I'm not a girl, but my significant other says that she could tell with me because I was the same around her as I was with my friends and her friends. I was respectful to her family, and I had a good career. Even then, there was skepticism at the start, but I just kept hanging out with her, and then we just had sex one day. It was a good day. Well, I guess it's not bad to get another perspective on the matter. It's really hard to initially tell. Usually I play it safe and don't really bring up anything sexual for a while. And if they're the type to really want sex and nothing else, usually they'll start making every conversation about it and almost insisting something happens soon. The ones you stick with are the ones that respect your boundaries and stay friends with you for you, not just your body. Oh, I don't know, there are some patient ones out there. But this individual is certainly not wrong. Watch his behavior. A genuinely good guy will invest his time in you. Even if he's been busy, he'll reach out to see how your day was because he cares. Want to learn things about you. It won't be superficial facts. He wants to know about who you are, your hopes, family, the things most important to you. Support you. He will want to know your hopes, dreams, and ambitions. For example, you need to study and there's a party he wants you to go to with him. If you tell him your studies are more important, he won't pressure you or guilt trip you for not going. Show you off. He will want to go on dates, post pictures with you, tell his friends and family about you. He doesn't want to confine you only to his apartment or bedroom. Engages in meaningful conversation. He will try to connect on more than just a physical level. It will be intellectual and emotional. A lot can also be said from a guy's language. Listen for the way he speaks. Does he say you're beautiful or puts you down? You should do more squats. Only talk sexually about your looks. Watch his eyes. There's a difference between a loving look and a lustful look. Keep in mind that everyone has flaws and nobody is perfect. To expect anyone to complete a checklist on a daily basis is excessive. We are human. Mistakes happen. But with a genuinely good man, it won't be an everyday occurrence. He will care and always strive to improve. These are just a few differences that I've noticed about the players and the man who treats me like a princess. Hope it helps you. Best of luck. You meet your Prince Charming. Pretty much hit the nail on the head. With my current boyfriend, I knew it was when he invited me to meet his best friend. His best friend is old enough to be his dad, but they trust each other so much. They help each other with racing and are very close. Another sign is when he would tell me what people would say at work. His co-workers would joke about me or ask about me. So that meant they knew about me, and he talked about me. That's a huge sign. Yeah, I like this how I like my women. Short and sweet. That's actually an utter lie. I like tall women because I don't have to lean down to give him a kiss. You know a guy is genuinely good if he has a large anime collection that ranges from figures, manga, DVD sets, and if he has a katana, wears a dashing fedora, has a well-kept and well-moisturized neckbeard by Mountain Dew, Doritos, and Grease, weighs at least 300 pounds, lives in his mom's basement at 37. Honestly, these types of guys are so much more genuine than a typical Chad trying to get laid. Picturing the dude from YOLO, Crystal Fantasy, or I don't know, he was better in the sequel, to be honest. He was hilarious in the sequel series. Reputation. Is he known in the friend circle for being a player? Stage in life. Does he talk about settling down with someone? Does he associate that someone with you? Personality. How does he behave around his close friends? What do they talk about? Does he keep his promises? Previous relationships. Does he have a previous long-term relationship? Did he have stages of one-night stands? Cheating history. Did he ever cheat before? If you're allergic to some food, does he avoid bringing that food near you? If you are sick, is he by your side? If you want to see him more often, does he make an effort to compromise? Yeah, that's all pretty correct stuff to be looking out for if you're, gauging a man for his long-term value, I guess. It's not a bad thing to think about, ladies. It's generally easiest to tell through how they treat people differently, but seeing them learn about your relationship status is obviously a shortcut if it's available to you. It's always a bummer when you're having a great time with a group of people and a guy you are hitting it off with, you platonically in your view, learns you're in a relationship and immediately starts to ignore you. It always really makes me sad, not that it happens a ton. I'm not a smoke show or anything. It's like, oh, I guess I'm just not as funny and interesting as I thought I was. That person didn't actually enjoy our conversation. He was just working on a potential lead. It really brings you low as a woman to see that guy continue to enthusiastically socialize with other guys in attendance after he stopped talking to you upon discovering your unavailability. I acknowledge the potential downsides to being on the male side of this equation. I was aware of them already, but now I've got an inbox nice and full of the same few messages over and over about how I just need to see it from a different perspective. I'm only trying to share my own experience and my own perspective of the downsides for women. That's an aspect that I've never really thought about. Not that I've ever chosen to just blatantly ignore a woman after finding out that she's taken or anything like that. But I also naturally understand the male perspective as well. Wherein, if you're a half-decent guy, if a woman says no, not interested, or I have a boyfriend, I'm unavailable, whatever the reason is, you're just gonna move on, get on with your time, and keep on looking. And while patience may be a virtue, why get your hopes up in thinking that something could happen in the future that very well may never happen? You've already been disappointed, potentially even laid your soul bare. And some men, honestly, just don't have the stomach to look someone in the eyes that they've exposed themselves to. But again, I absolutely get where this woman is coming from. I never really thought about it like that. If he has crippling trust issues, he already doesn't expect anything from you. He doesn't expect anything from anyone. Feel like a dude wrote this. And yet, I hear that. I've found a really good checklist to be, is he trying to elicit a specific behavior or response from me? Or is he being sincere? Is he focused on how the situation affects him or how it affects me/the people around him? Example, I've had both good guys and nice guys tell me they had feelings for me. The nice guy said,
well, I just don't understand why you won't go out with me. Like, what else could I do? You're the perfect girl for me. You don't know how hard it is to see the perfect person for you and not be able to have them.
The good guy said, since we're friends, I think I owe it to you to be totally honest and tell you that I've started developing feelings for you. You don't have to reciprocate or anything right now. I just wanted to be upfront so things don't get weird later. Both hyperbole, I'm sure, because I don't think anyone actually speaks like that. Also, I'm seeing a lot of checklists on here. Women, can you just tell me, is that a thing you do? You just look for checklists on, how to spot the ideal man for you? I agree with the other posts, but to add something less conventional that might not apply to all guys, I find that when a guy is really, really interested, then they sometimes act nervous or hesitate a little. Makes it less likely that they're trying to get into someone's pants kind of guys and genuinely likes you and doesn't want to fudge it up. Oh, most definitely. I'll always remember the most nervous I was when I asked my girlfriend, do you want to play Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube?
Guy here. Everyone is a butthole about something. Grammar Nazi. Goes on and on about the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. Obnoxious around sports. Obnoxious around politics. Snobbish about beer. Crossfitter. Gamer. Etc. Most of us learn to be civil about our buttholery, but we learn to manage it and recognize that it's kind of unacceptable. We apologize for it, but we don't hide it. If you can't find a guy's metaphorical butthole, he's definitely not a nice guy. The Duke couldn't agree more.
That's enough unnecessary editing on my part, but there was something vaguely Duke Nukem-esque about that comment for some reason. So my boyfriend and I were friends for a couple of years before we got together. I was dating another guy the entire time. I actually fell for current BF while dating the other guy. X was an abusive butthole. I didn't cheat on him, so regret nothing. He was into me and very much wanted to date me, but since I had a boyfriend, he accepted that it wasn't possible and was content to be my friend. Although I complained about the ex to him all the time, he had never once badmouthed him or disrespected our relationship. And when it got painful for him to be in love with a girl he couldn't have, he didn't take it out on me. He simply distanced himself a bit and let himself heal. He's a good man. That is pretty darn nice. I'm glad things worked out for them. I let guys know in advance that my pants are off limits. The ones who seem unfazed by this are generally better guys than the ones who pull a face and try to negotiate.
Not even if the terrorists have placed a bomb in your nether regions and my penis is the only thing big or small enough to, get to it and disarm it?
Bruno, how would your penis even operate the complicated bomb-disarming gear?
I've been training for this very specific event my entire life.
If he treats me like a normal human being and not a locked chest in a video game or a math problem. That being said, sometimes you don't know until you do it with them and they turn into complete buttholes. I had a really close friend who acted like a genuine, real friend for about a year and a half without trying to get in my pants, and then completely ghosts me once we had sex. It was really bizarre and kind of screwed up. A good tip to discern the latter. If they have a certain reputation or they treat you differently than others, it's a yellow flag and you should look a bit closer.
So that's what women mean when they say they don't want to jeopardize the friendship.
If his face lights up when he sees you, he respects when you say no, remembers your likes and dislikes, and he takes care of you when you're sick as a dog, even though you're contagious.
You'll never find, as long as you live,
someone who loves you tender like I do. When he does the right thing, even when he's conflicted at times, being aware of how his actions may make someone feel and is in tune with other people's emotions, not crossing boundaries with a lady, ever. After typing this, I feel like I'm asking for too much. Even I'm not this perfect.
But no one needs to be perfect for someone to love them.
Your question is vague, and if you want generic advice, just keep on scrolling through the numerous comments on what makes a good guy. A good guy is a subjective measure, so it's what works for you. That's why women struggle to leave abusive relationships, because somewhere in them, they find a good guy. Don't overanalyze this because it has to work for you. You should feel comfortable with the guy, and most importantly, you should have fun and it should be easy. If it's a struggle, then walk. What's stopping you? He hasn't gotten your pants already, so why are you worried of walking? If you're a good judge of character, you'll get more good guys than bad, but that's because you judge character better and select more compatible matches, not because there are more or less good or bad guys out there. Reality is, all guys want to get in your pants. If we didn't, then we would be gay and want to get in another dude's pants. Your actual question is, how do I keep a guy in my pants? For that, you need to ask yourself, what do I actually bring to the table? Too many girls are just pretty and nothing more. Guys get bored of them and leave them or cheat, and the answer to that is lead a fulfilling life. Have interests, be curious, confident, and genuine. If you're an interesting woman that is able to look after herself, you will be more appealing to guys, and they will want to stick around. One final thing I would say, beware of the jealous guys that would prevent you from doing this. You need a person who will support you maturing as a human being, but at the same time be comfortable telling you that he doesn't like you seeing your ex, for example. For that, you need a guy who is confident and active and fulfilled himself. I ain't gonna lie, the guy came in pretty hot, sounding snobbish and overall rather disagreeable in general, but that's some solid advice right there. Probably some of the best advice that I've seen on this thread. My husband was the first guy I ever went on a real date with. On said date, it started raining while we were taking a walk outside, and he took off his jacket just to hold it over me. Before that, I thought real dates didn't actually happen anymore. He's always been the kindest and gentlest man I've ever had in my life. Never judges me or puts me down in any way. Even when guys are trying to act like they care to get in your pants, they are terrible at it and end up saying or doing something degrading. Well, you sound quite happy with your husband, but that also sounded like a low note to end on, and I shall not allow it. My husband and I didn't kiss until we got engaged, and didn't do anything past that until we were married. It's been 11 years now, and we're still going strong. I know it's not a popular way to go about it, but it worked for us.
Oh yeah! Good old Christian boys and girls in the house!
loves.
But for real though, I have mad respect for people who can wait that long and be that dedicated to one another without, being intimate like that. I mean, I said at the very beginning, my unga bunga man brain says to me 2 months to wait that long is a pretty long time. If you gave me that as a definitive time to wait that long for intimacy, I might make myself a goddamn advent calendar for like Christmas time with the chocolates in it to, give myself something to look forward to every day.
What happened at the worst party you've ever been to? I went to a friend's graduation party after high school. I wasn't great friends with him, but I figured I would stop by with my girlfriend because he was nice enough to invite me. The party was so done up, tables full of food, streamers, confetti, all that junk, and my girlfriend and I were the only ones there. I felt awful. His parents clearly went all out to celebrate it, and it was so uncomfortable being one of 5 people there, including him and his parents. I felt awful for him. We stayed for hours out of pity and just kind of made small talk. Super depressing. We went to a friend's 40th birthday last year. She's burned some bridges lately and had an ugly divorce. My husband and I didn't want to go, but we felt like it would be good to show up. Same thing, lavishly decorated, amazing food, lots of drink. We were tastefully late and arrived to find her alone, weeping in the kitchen. There was no escape, even after she chastised us for being so late. So frickin' sad. And all she wanted to talk about was that she was sure other folks would show up soon. Leaving was way more uncomfortable than staying, but by 1 a.m. it was clear no one else was coming. We were full and tipsy and walked home in a depressed silence. High school, late 80s, at an outside party with a bonfire to celebrate the end of the school year. Some numbnuts throws a glass bottle of beer into the fire, and about 20 minutes later that bottle explodes and shoots a stream of boiling beer all over a girl's crotch and legs. Ambulance was called. I believe she required several skin grafts over several months. I can still remember her shrill screaming and then her passing out. I had kind of a similar thing happen, but with far less of a horrible climax to it, where some guy who crashed a camping party that we were doing, lots of beer and all that stuff, threw a beer can on the fire. That beer can popped due to the heat and the gas releasing all of a sudden, and it landed on a friend's tent, burning their tent down, and they had to sleep with me the night. My brother was at a party once where there were more than a couple underage drinkers present. The house they were at had a thin driveway, so all the cars were packed into a bottleneck. The night wore on, and around 1 a.m, someone decided they wanted to go home. They found the girl who owned the car at the front of the bottleneck and asked her to move her car so she could get out. She said she couldn't because she had a breathalyzer installed in her car and it wouldn't start until someone sober blew into it. They went around the party and tried to find anyone who hasn't been drinking and couldn't find one. Another guy had the brilliant idea of asking the cool 20-something dude next door to do it. So an envoy of teens heads over to the house next door and asks the dude living there if he would please blow into a breathalyzer so they could leave. The dude takes a minute to look the group over, takes a drag of his cigarette and says, "You're gonna give me $25 for every person at the party or I'm calling the cops." He certainly has the makings of a savvy businessman. My sister's birthday was in the middle of the school holidays, and for her 7th birthday, she had a party that no one turned up to. Turns out our mother put the wrong date on the invite, so a lot of people had tried to come over the day before whilst we were out. This makes me feel very grateful that a large breadth of the guests, I suppose, I invite to parties usually show up. Some girl apparently had made out with a guy who wasn't her boyfriend before leaving. Someone at the party tells him via text, and a little while later, someone is kicking down the door. He barges in, waving a gun around, screaming, "Which one of you douchebags made out with my girl?" People are ducking, scurrying away, and I'm just standing there thinking, if this is how I die, I'm going to be so mad. Host, who knew him, quickly pushed him out the door. Host just walks in and says, "Jerry, you're ruining another party? That's it. I don't care if you're armed and dangerous. Get the hell out of my house." My pal had a birthday sleepover. We were in 8th or 9th grade, I think. Street Fighter 2 had just came out for the SNES, so that was basically all we did. His parents had laid out some snacks and drinks on a party table, and there was one of these huge bags of party-sized Doritos there. We were playing Street Fighter when one of the guys grabbed a chip, bit into it, and yelled, "Oh, this chip is wet." He began investigating the bag, and we quickly discovered all the chips were wet. The birthday boy's 5-year-old brother had taken advantage of our Street Fighter distraction and licked all of the Dorito dust from every chip and placed them back in the bag. We found him playing in his room, his face covered in the implicating dust. This reminds me of a significantly less disgusting prank I wanted to pull on my brother, where I took all these soft chocolate-filled bits from a box of Cocoa Pops Rocks, if anyone remembers that cereal, months go by. Turned
turned out he didn't really eat cereal anymore, so I had to eat this whole bowl of, the hard bits in Cocoa Pops Rocks. And I was like, well, damn, that was a waste of time. And I also remember one time my brother tried to give me a sandwich, a jam sandwich, which as a little boy was my favorite, but I had so little trust in him, I was like, what did you do to it? Nothing. And I looked in it. I just immediately examined the sandwich, opened it up, and there was just a pair of sardines in it.
Went to a bachelor party at a house someone rented with a buddy. We got there late, so everyone was pretty lit by the time we got there, especially the bachelor. Now, he had hired like 4 entertainers of a certain variety for the party to walk around and dance for everybody, but at one point, the entertainers took the bachelor to the middle of the room, and they were going to do a dance just for him. Again, by this time, the dude is gone, but he managed to stumble into a chair in the middle of the room. The entertainers set up this kiddie pool in front of him, and a couple of them were going to wrestle each other, covered in baby oil. While they were oiling each other up in the middle of the room, one of the other entertainers starts to dance for the guy, and well, she made it past like one verse of Pour Some Sugar on Me when homie just threw up everywhere. I mean, this was like someone turned on a fire hose of vomit. Of course, he just drenched the poor girl that was dancing for him, which made her freak out and run away towards the kiddie pool, which, may I remind you, now has 2 oiled up entertainers. And this lady, covered in vomit, slips, takes the other girls down with her, and she throws up all over them. At this point, there's 3 entertainers flailing around like fish out of water, trying desperately to get out of a kiddie pool covered in baby oil and vomit, slipping and falling over each other while the bachelor is just passed the hell out, covered in vomit, drooling on himself in a chair in the middle of the room. And just to add to this, I guess the entertainers bring a guy with them for protection or whatever, and he is losing his crap. He's trying to get the girls out of the pool, getting all sorts of nasty stuff on himself, slipping around while just repeating, "What the hell?" over and over. Good times. For some more than others, surely.
White racist redneck guy took off his shirt to reveal prison swastika tattoos, also pulled out a gun saying he would go commit hate crimes. He began waving the gun around, getting upset. He was already super wasted. I left the room and just about left the party, but the guy who owned the house made him put his gun out in his car. Fast forward a couple hours, we were playing beer pong. Drunk racist swastika dude was playing on a team with his wife. Me and my best friend were his opponents. He was too drunk to hit anything, and his sober wife sucked. So he used distraction tactics. He took out his pecker and flopped it into the cups. His pecker was freaking huge. After a while, that stopped fazing us, so he decided to take his 20-year-old wife's clothes off. He stripped her naked while she was sober, the only girl at the party, in front of like 20 other drunk dudes. She did not look comfortable, but also, for whatever reason, didn't stop him. After a while, once that wore off, he ordered her to go to our side of the table and flirt with us while she was naked. That's when I left. Next time I saw him was after my friend's death. Drunk racist dude had given my buddy a bunch of pills, and my buddy, like an idiot, took them. Started feeling weird, drove home, and died when his heart blew up. Nobody found him for 3 days. Drunk racist dude showed up at my work, crying because he hadn't been invited to the funeral, because he had essentially killed him. He was upset that nobody seemed to care about him and that even his wife had left him. Thank Christ. I don't know why he thought I would care, but he said I was the only one he could talk to. I had only met him twice before this. It was awkward, and I told him he'd be okay. He just needed to figure some stuff out. I was pretty honest with him about all the crap that he had done, which was stupid. He agreed. I bought him a pack of cigarettes. I worked at a gas station at the time, and he rode off on his motorcycle. Never heard from him again after that. No idea what happened. I'm curious about what other company this person keeps to even be in the vicinity of this individual. Like, I'm all for having a diverse, rich group of friends from all walks of life, whether they be liberal, conservative, religious, non-religious, but at a certain point, you gotta look at someone and go like, I don't even want to be in the same vicinity as you. Somebody brought their baby. Keep in mind, we were all 17, so it was like, what the hell? My 9th birthday party, I invited the entire class as well as my only friends. They went to another school. The only person that showed up was my grandpa. Over 10 years ago, my employees got together to throw me a going-away party. It was held at a local bar that had closed to the public, just for the party, so of course I'm feeling really special. There was a kid there, around 19 years old, who was a really good guy but generally attracted trouble. I used to talk to him all the time, and any time I sensed that he was about to step and do something stupid, I used to always say, you know, the worst gift a kid can give his mother a dead son. There's a long story behind that, but it just somehow became a thing I always said to him. Anyway, I gave a quick speech and started to duck out just as things were livening up so everybody could have their fun while I returned to my wife and our newborn. I bumped into that kid on the way out, talked to him a bit, and of course the dead son line was the last thing I said before I left. Actually, I said, "You know the worst gift," and he answered, "A dead son," gave me a hug, and that was it. Pretty obvious how this story ends. Got the call a few hours later telling me he'd been killed in a car wreck. Turns out that he was trying to do good. Hadn't drank a drop, no drugs or anything. He just got into the wrong car and let a drunk idiot drive him home. There were about 4 kids in the car, and he was the only one that didn't walk away. Sad. A friend told me about this corporate party held for the clients he was at. Open bar, but pretty dull, with people being on their best behavior to schmooze and make the clients feel important. It was open bar in the sense that employees were understood to hold it together. One very, very low on the totem pole employee got hammered drunk with one of their biggest clients and proceeded to get to 3rd or 4th base in the pool for like half an hour. He was fired the following Monday. Probably worth it to him as he was making minimum wage. My wife was on her way up to the north of England to be a bridesmaid for her friend who she has known since they were young. Her friend has learning disabilities, but seems happy with her husband-to-be. On the morning of the wedding, the groom was arrested for bad-touching young children. He was apparently a known pedophile. The bride's family went ahead with the wedding reception anyway. If they actually knew, that is utterly insane to me. An old friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us used to throw house parties all the time in high school. It would usually be 15 to 30 people getting wasted and doing illegal substances. This one particular time he hosted a massive high school party because his parents weren't home. So he had probably between 80 to 90 of us teenagers at his house partying like crazy and using every illegal substance that we could get our hands on. About an hour and a half goes by, and people are messed up and having a blast. I was toasty. My buddy who hosted the party filled up capsules with illegal high, and he was swallowing those all night. So, like I said, an hour and a half goes by, and someone asks him where his parents went on vacation. His response? They're not on vacation. They went out to watch a movie. Just then is when the car rolls up, and suddenly a bunch of drunk and stoned punks pour out of every orifice of the house to the closest park. Every single person in that house took off. Everyone, even the guy who hosted the party. I don't know if he was worried his parents would kill him, or maybe he was so messed up he just forgot that he was at his own house. Man, I missed that guy. I was in high school and a classmate was moving, and his family had already gone to the new house. The old house was going to be torn down and was vacant, so he threw a break my stuff party. People showed up with baseball bats, all kinds of stuff, and I felt underdressed with an axe handle. Alcohol was involved. I was greeted at the door by a guy with a 6-shooter in his waistband holding a chainsaw. The event only went downhill from there. I was 16 and now, many years later, I'm a dad. It makes me cringe very hard that my offspring would never attend an event like that. Not gonna lie, that sounds pretty fun. But I'd probably be like bringing stuff or I'd be like, is this okay to break? Is this okay to break? And it's like, everything's okay to break. I'd be self-conscious about it. I went to the beach for a friend's birthday party. After the sun went down, we drove back to her house, about 30 minutes away, to continue the party. When we got home, her dog was dead. Because she lived in a rural area, the other guys and I had to dig a hole and bury it so the coyotes wouldn't consume the carcass. Burying a dead dog is the weirdest thing I've ever done at a birthday party. Good Lord, I can only imagine just how devastated that girl would have been. I'd be heartbroken if I came home for a party and my dog was dead. That'd just be parties cancelled. Maybe sit around and feel bad and play Mario Kart for a bit, but I'd probably be losing with all the tears in my eyes. Halloween 2007. Random friend of devil's lettuce dealer having a party at the house across the street from the religious college APU. Those kids party hard. Best buddy and I made Roman armor with sheet metal by hand. We were definitely proud and looked kinda cool, I must say. Anyway, we show up to this party and there are maybe 20 people. The house is really small. Dude whose place it is like extremely stoked on our costumes. Makes us feel really welcome, which is nice at a stranger's party. He asks us if we can guard the the keg and says we can drink all we want from it. We agree, of course. He has the keg in the laundry room, which is small. We chill and drink lots and meet lots of cool people getting beers. Hour rolls by and we realize that the party has gotten huge. 2 new kegs delivered, well over 150 people. The house is so full, it's scary. We are still at the keg, and the bathroom is far away. My buddy is wasted and decides to pee into the washer. No regrets on his part. I try to make my way through the crowd, which is utterly impossible. My hand-cut sheet metal armor is poking and slicing people the more I push. Bad idea. People start screaming and laughing. Suddenly, some girl had to poop so bad that she just popped down in the crowd and let loose. The cops are also breaking up the party. House smells horrible. Friend and I are the last ones out. Poop smeared all over the floor, trampled and painted everywhere. Cops are dying laughing at the situation. I puke outside soon as we exit, like gallons of beer puke. Cops compliment my costume while crying, laughing. That was the highlight of the night, and that chick must not have pooped for days. This entire topic is reminding me of why I simultaneously miss and don't miss wild parties. I was at a trashy shotgun wedding reception and slipped off to take a whiz in the bushes. When I came back, there were 2 blonde strippers dressed as cops arresting the groom. I said, "Who the hell rents strippers for a wedding?" Really loud right as the music cut out. They were not strippers. Went to an isolated cottage in the woods up north that my friend's rich family owned. There was about 15 of us. Everyone except for me imbibed in some illegal substances. I don't do that stuff, really, but have no problem with them if they want to. I was getting drunk and had enough fun with that. Everything was going great until one guy started to have a really bad trip. Me and the guy who owned the cottage were the ones taking care of him because I was the most sober and he felt responsible for his parents' cabin. It turned really scary really fast. I pretty much carried him up the stairs into a room before someone else noticed and got a friend to come help me. We'd turn on the light and he'd start screaming that it was too bright. We'd turn off the light. He'd scream that it was too dark. He kept complaining that he had to use the bathroom, but wouldn't get up when we urged him to. My friend told me to fetch a different friend who said that he was not in the state of mind to deal with it and refused. Another friend told me that she knows him better than anyone else, so she should go talk to him. I tried to stop her, but she dashed past me and ran upstairs into the room and came out crying because he'd punched her in the face and then wet himself and peed all over her. We didn't know what to do. We just kind of left him in the room and went downstairs while all that was heard from upstairs was screaming and banging. We sat around in a circle and debated whether or not we should call an ambulance. Everyone ultimately decided against it because they didn't want to be fined for having illegal substances. The noises eventually stopped and we all went to bed. The next day, we found out that our friend had felt like he was trapped in his own skin and was trying to claw, bite, and rip it off. He was covered in bite marks and scratches. Everyone treated him like a monster and avoided him the next day, which made me really angry because it could have just as easily happened to any of them. That sounds like one major bummer of a night, and I sympathize in the disappointment with the other friends. Like, damn, to treat him so callously after, having a bad trip and whatnot. Hopefully that didn't just, put a wedge between that guy and the rest of the friendship group, because, God, that'd be sad. College party. Pre-drank with my buddies and their roommate Ryan. Ryan gets drunk, high, super confidence, and starts teaching us how to not take any guff from no one. We're walking to the party, and with zero context, he's preaching shoulders back, stand up straight, get right up in the guy's face. No idea why he feels the need to be such a tough guy. Within 5 minutes of being at the party, another guy puts Ryan in a headlock and blasts him in the face a quick 5 or so times. Blood everywhere, hosts freaking out. It turns out they were arguing about how good a mutual friend was at water skiing. Am I the only one confused about how that would lead to such violence? The only thing I can say that's resulted of this is that now I am more interested in how good this person is at water skiing and whose opinion was whose. Kid hosting the party didn't plan on dad coming home. Dad showed up, freaked out, cuts off his kid's finger with a decorative sword. Party ended. Kid went to the hospital to have his fingers reattached and showed back up at the house we moved the party to with a giant cast on. No, the dad didn't get in trouble. The kid was probably 19 or 20 and must have not told the hospital what had happened. Also, he cut them off closer to the tip, not the entire finger. I'm guessing they just sewed them back on. I don't think it required actual surgery. It happened relatively early in the evening and and he didn't show back up at the next house until hours later. It was probably close to sunrise. It wasn't really a party at the next house. It was more like half the people from the sword house sitting around drinking and talking about how messed up the night was. That would certainly be a night to remember for just about everyone involved, I must say. That's hilarious, but also tragic. I'm mixed on this. It was the first party I ever went to, and the worst party I ever went to. It was all going great until this dude, drunk, caught his girlfriend making out with his friend and threw a freaking TV at him. Then he just went absolutely ape crazy and started screaming at him in the GF. I, like the others, stood in shock and slowly proceeded to finish my Pepsi and then get the hell out. After I left, my friend said, "Waste of a perfectly good TV." I was pledging to a fraternity and we had a crazy party. Towards the end, there were passed out people all over and a few brothers and myself who were still awake at 3 a.m. trying to kick strangers out. The last group was this passed out girl and her friend sitting on our couch on the first floor, and after much prodding and poking, the passed out chick begins to stir and moan, then proceeds to drunkenly sit up and mumble, "I need to pee." She stands up all wobbly, then suddenly takes off her pants. Her friend has a shocked face, knowing what's about to happen. Brother Joe has a huge grin on his face, and I'm like, what the hell? The drunk chick squats and begins to pee all over our tiles. It was hilarious, and when she's done, her embarrassed friend grabs her and quickly leaves. We're all laughing our butts off when suddenly Joe abruptly stops laughing and yells to me, "Pledge, grab 'em up and clean this up." What's something you found out about your significant other years into the relationship that made you reevaluate the whole thing? 9 months into the relationship, I found out he had a court date. He told me it was for assaulting a bouncer. Very soon after, his mother admitted that he had a court date for assaulting his underage relative. When I confronted him about this, he said that the underage girl raped him. When I told him he was full of crap, he went on to admit that she did something for him that I will not say. Soon after, I went into his lawyer's office with him and read the transcript. It turns out he had raped his underage niece twice and just tells a different lie to anyone who asks him why he's in jail. Total piece of crap. I ran very fast, haven't seen him since, and I hope I will never see him again. About 1 year in, he told me he was about to get full custody of his son. I didn't know he had a son. About a year in, I found out she lied to me about getting an STD test. Turned out she had more than one STD, which somehow I tested clean for. There is actually a reason for that. Some STDs have an easier time transmitting from men to women than from women to men. When I had my first child, the pregnancy wasn't a surprise or an accident. We talked and planned. He got a little overbearing during the pregnancy, like insisting on breastfeeding without even discussing it with me. I put it down to new dad nerves and not knowing any better. Turns out that was only the tip of the iceberg. He believed that children were completely and totally a wife's responsibility. He wouldn't change a diaper. He wouldn't pick up the baby when it cried. No way would he get up in the middle of the night. He expected me to work a full-time job plus do all of the childcare. At that point, I was confused and appalled, but I told myself he just needed time to adjust. I realized how delusional I was when the baby got sick while he was on a fishing trip. The doctors thought the baby had meningitis, so not just sick, but life-threatening sick. I called and asked him to come home. He refused. He'd paid for 2 more days of fishing, and he didn't want to lose the money. She would lie about tiny, inconsequential things, made me question my own perception of truth and self-instinct. Eventually caught her in a lie, and she denied even when presented with full proof. It wasn't something huge, but it was something that opened my eyes a little. My friend swears I was being gaslit. Out of nowhere, a year into being married, he said he wants to join the Marine Corps. He also wanted me to drop out of law school, birth babies, take care of his mother, and run a household, all while he's deployed. Hard pass. Found his hidden folder on his phone, blackmailed girls for nudes, stole nudes from girls, pretended to be someone else and sexted his sister without her knowing it was him. Constantly made me feel like I was crazy or overreacting. Also realized what him calling me a manic pixie dream girl meant. I'm hardly a perfect specimen of a human being. I would like to believe that I have a respectable amount of moral fiber, but boy, do y'all know how to pick 'em. 7 years in, after having been married a year, my husband finally confessed to me that he was raped as a child for 6 years by his older brother. It really threw the struggles of our SX life into perspective. Now knowing this, I have done all kinds of research, found how to support rape victims, info, and I've changed how I behave when we're intimate. We're working on it. I tell him every time we're intimate that it's an act of love and he's safe with me, and we have our safe word for general use if he's feeling overwhelmed. We're really making progress. I think things are better now. He's starting to understand that it's love in our marriage, and I want him to want me, and I want him to be a little controlling when he feels up to it. He's grown a lot, he's a very strong person, and I'm immeasurably lucky to have him. That is a lot of trauma and baggage to take on, but with the right person and a whole lot of love, I think you'll get through it. I realized he would always blame me for his angry outbursts and mistakes. He punched a wall and screamed about a homework assignment he didn't understand because I was sitting on the couch quietly. Then after he was finished blaming me and realized I was upset, he became all sad and wanted me to comfort him. What a pathetic human being. I'm glad I've grown past accepting that sort of behavior. That my husband wanted to start fires and kill police officers and was planning on framing me for it so his girlfriend could move in while I did his time in prison for him. We were driving home from a dinner in which we drove separately to, and without knowing it, she cut me off by merging into my lane last minute without using a blinker. I was annoyed at first, but when I recognized it was her car, it made me feel very strange. I think that makes sense. Knowing that your significant other might be really reckless on the road is worrying, concerning, very concerning, especially if you plan to have kids. That she cheated on me and that she lied about being psychologically abused by her father. She lied about being financially responsible and was formulating a plan to murder me. Today, my girlfriend told me that every time we argue, she wants to stab me. Now, she might not mean it, but that is certainly a red flag. That she had been in contact with her exes, met them, and regularly cheated on me with just whomever. 8 years, she was really good at hiding her tracks. I only found out because I contracted an STD, curable fortunately, from her. I was really glad we didn't have kids and divorced her, moved away and drank too much. Then I met the most awesome person in the world, who I married, had kids, and didn't know relationships could be this good. Turned out my husband, who was sober from illegal substances and alcohol, had been using booger sugar monthly for the last 15 years, just enough to maintain apparently. We have worked it out, but I was almost gone at that point. He hid a few addictions and withdrawals from me. I forgave him. He stole $4,000 from our joint savings that only I contributed to. I forgave him. He sexted and was trying to meet up with randos, which made me realize I should probably leave. But the thing that made me certain was when I realized he didn't actually want an equal relationship. He expected me to shop, cook, clean, and be responsible for him for the rest of our lives. He pretended to want what I wanted for years, and I was dumb enough to believe his excuses on why he just couldn't do it yet. I demand and I deserve a reasonable equal relationship. Divorce was one of the best things I ever did. That she wants to have fights and be mad. For example, we currently haven't spoken for 3 days and she's sleeping in the other room because I accidentally texted "good night, sleep tight" instead of just "good night" because I was the one going to bed, not her. So in her mind, that text must have been meant for another woman. We live together, we work together, we share a car. How on God's green earth could I have a side chick? She told me when we first met that she was broken as she suffers from depression. I didn't brush it off, so to speak, but just kind of thought, yeah, whatever, it won't be that bad. It's not because I don't think depression isn't serious, but I just had never even really been in contact with someone with depression, so I kind of had no idea what it entails. Hopefully that makes sense. 5.5 years of being together later, and holy cow, damn, depression is just super serious. I've been in situations and scenarios I never imagined being in because of her and her depression. She's phoned me up twice while she was working in London. I live 60 miles away in Kent, saying she loves me and she's sorry and she's going to end it. What the hell do I do? I didn't know what to frickin' do. Thankfully, both of those times she never went ahead with it, but still ended up in hospital, and obviously I went up to her. Sometimes she's just crying and crying and crying and crying. Countless visits to the GP for talks and medication. Again, things I've never dealt with before, and at first I was extremely uncomfortable about it all. This isn't for me kind of stuff. But the good news is it and she are part of my life now. I don't mind all of the above anymore. She loves me and I love her. What's even more amazing is that I'm the one that keeps her going, she says. This is life, and I'm now fully aware of the seriousness of depression. She recently got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Made me look back and realize a lot of her actions and anger stemmed from that. She just started mood stabilizers and has found a great therapist to help her work through everything. But it would have almost been a deal breaker if she didn't try to actively manage it. She lied to me, or rather flat out denied telling me that she has herpes. Guess who has herpes now? Her reasoning? I thought you wouldn't talk to me if you found out I had it. I would have kept talking to her, but perhaps I would have wrapped it up first before, doing the deed so soon. Just frickin' disclose that information at the start. Don't be a butt who gives someone an STD knowingly. Yeah, that is definitely just completely and utterly unacceptable. 7 years in, I found out he was a high school dropout without even a GED. He had initially told me he was a game design major, turned down a job opportunity or internship, I can't recall which, with EA Toronto because he didn't want to leave me. I literally told him, go, we can figure other crap out later. This won't wait. I should have known then. Ugh, love is blind, but only for so long. Turns out when she said she wanted to get married, she actually meant that she just wanted to get married, by which I mean wanting to get married is not the same thing as wanting to marry me. I just happened to be the guy that she was with at the time when her friends were getting married, and it was making her jealous, and her mother was also putting pressure on her to get married. It happens to a lot more people than you think. After several years together, my ex told me nonchalantly one evening that he stole $500 from one of his best friends because he really needed it. This ex was a college-educated person trying to get into dental, medical, or pharmacy school. Not only was there no reason for this person to steal their friend's money, I didn't understand how someone could do that and feel no remorse whatsoever, especially to someone they considered a good friend. It was at that moment that I seriously began to believe I had given my trust and love to a total sociopath. It was the catalyst that pushed me out of the relationship. I found out later that while I was working on a degree in another city, he found dates on Tinder, spinning lies about being in med school and owning a luxury condo overlooking the Wisconsin state capitol. He'd take girls for rides on my motorcycle and bring them back to the condo I owned. I don't know who or how many, but a neighbor specifically went out of their way to tell me what was going on. One of his Tinder dates was with a good friend's best friend, and I heard through her the lies about being rich and working in medicine. A high school classmate of his texted me to warn me the same thing. He hit on a girl at a reunion by saying he was in med school at Wisconsin, but the girl was actually in med school at Wisconsin, and she promptly told everyone about the exchange. When I went to kick him out of the condo, he told me that his mother had turned into a raging alcoholic and that kicking him out would mean he couldn't take care of her anymore. He stole a whole bunch of stuff from me, some of which he still has, and after all of it, he had the gall to text and ask if he could manage my finances for me at his new job in, believe it or not, wealth management. I guarantee you he's stealing from every one of his clients. But when he said he stole from his friend, it really changed my opinion that he wasn't just an insecure millennial trying to find his way between college and the real world. He's a class A raging narcissist, and holy crap, am I glad he's out of my life forever. A little over a year after being officially together, I finally put together that they had the cancer gene in their family. Despite being crazy in love with her, this made me want to back out because I totally saw a future with her. Her grandpa and dad both had head and neck cancers, 2 aunts and 1 uncle were survivors of ovarian and lung cancer. I knew I wanted kids, and she did too, so there was always this looming fear that our future kids might get it. Still went through because she mattered more to me than all my fears combined. Life plays a cruel joke, and despite having no vices and being an occasional drinker, she got the big C as well. Head and neck, just like Grandpa and her dad. Lost her a little over a year ago. Still no regrets. Still love her a lot. Damn. My wife and I married quickly without getting to know each other much. She was raised in a Mormon home, and I had converted to Mormonism at 18. We played the roles of provider and nurturer in our marriage according to the teachings of the faith. I left the faith about 6 years ago. She stopped attending about 2 to 3 years ago. The very difficult conversation when I left made us talk about things more than we ever had before. We dove deeply into so many aspects of our life, marriage, and desires for the future. I realized after years of marriage that she was actually an incredibly smart, dynamic woman. I loved her a lot before this. I always thought she was amazing, but because of the dynamics of each of our upbringings and the dynamic of the faith, I never realized how intelligent she was. I ask her opinions on things all the time now. We left our faith, ditched most of our baggage from our sexist upbringings, and I realized how great of a lifelong companion I have, and I am ecstatic about this. that he had been cheating on me and racking up debt. We had gotten married and made life plans that he had always known would never come to fruition because of what he was doing behind closed doors. Yet he allowed me to marry him anyway, knowing I was signing up for a life I did not want and that we did not agree on. I would have been the one to bear the brunt of the consequences for his actions. Well, I'm glad you got out of there. He told me from the very get-go that he was diagnosed with Asperger's in grade school, but I just brushed it off because I know many people who half-heartedly claim to be autistic. But a couple weeks ago, I was lying in bed while he was putting away one of his 50 pocket watches in his holding box that he keeps in pristine condition tucked away in his sock drawer. Then he proceeded to pick out a new axe to carry in his backpack full of supplies, and for some reason, it just hit me for the first true time that he is totally, 100% on the spectrum. And it made me think back to the times when he has done things that absolutely infuriate me, and he has no idea he had done something wrong, and suddenly I could see that he wasn't being manipulative or underhanded. His brain simply works in a different way than mine, and he even tried to warn me of this. I just, for some reason, chose to disregard the information. He is super willing to meet me halfway, even when he doesn't understand why something bothers me. He acknowledges how I feel, and he stops doing it. He is the goofiest, most eccentric ball of love I have ever met, and coming to terms with his autism has made me love him all that much more.
Men! I don't know who needs to hear this, but there's still hope!
He was always very secretive and a little paranoid. One example, I learned about 15 years into the relationship that his birthday is not in May like he said, but in November. When he moved to the US from England in the 1970s, they had written it down incorrectly in his passport, and he never changed it to his correct birth date. I still don't know why. Every flat and clean surface can and will become a closet space. It was my girlfriend of 2 years last night in town before leaving for college. She told me she was hanging out with her friends, which I was fine with, as we had planned to see each other every weekend. Turns out she didn't see her friends. She hung out with her ex-boyfriend and then left for school the next day and didn't answer her phone for a week. First time I talked to her after she left, she told me what she did and broke up with me. See, this kind of thing is why people have trust issues. That and much worse things. Things that have already been covered in this video even. There's a ton of things I discovered over the years we were together, but the biggest one was how he had lied about his exes. He talked terribly about them and would make them all sound like cheaters and liars or just plain psychopathic. It turns out that's not the truth at all. They were none of those things, and I found out the hard way that it was him that embodied those qualities all along. We have broken up and gotten back together many times over the past 6 years, but it ended for the last time this weekend. Good for you. She is perfectly okay flipping out on the kids. I mean, full-on cussing them out and yelling about stuff. I ultimately confronted her about it, and she said, "So everyone else is allowed to express themselves when they're upset, but not me?" We had to have a long talk after that one, as would be expected. Her walls were just too high to ever get through. Intimacy, affection, emotion, romance, all gone, and she was unwilling to change. As can be the case with some to many people for a myriad of reasons, and it can be quite sad. I was just out of high school and was dating a girl. We were fairly serious but young. We went to Subway for lunch, and she was super rude to the poor girl working behind the counter, and after we left, she was saying how stupid she was. Couldn't even make the sandwich right. I started to notice she was rude to lots of service and retail workers. I saw her in a much different light after that. We didn't last very long. I think there's a saying where it goes something like, if someone's nice to you but not to the waiter, then they're probably not really a nice person. We are Texans. He likes beans in his chili, but I've decided I can make it work. 3 years into a 5-year relationship, my now ex-girlfriend finally told me she had a bad eating disorder after I overheard her throwing up after a meal. It was something I suspected in the past and questioned her on, but she was adamant with her denials. This was not the end. In fact, it was really just planting a seed of doubt. 2 years from this point, we were still together, and I was still trying to support her through treatment of her disorder. Eventually, more of her secrets started to come out: secretive alcoholism, childhood abuse, cheating. Even with all the secrets and lies, it was not easy to cut ties, but it was needed in order to keep my own sanity. My wife and I have very little boundaries. Oftentimes, while we're having a conversation in our room, one of us needs to use the bathroom. We'll just follow each other in the bathroom and continue talking. If the conversation is good enough, poop won't hinder our dialogue. However, there are times when my wife is in the bathroom and locks the door. I always thought it was weird, but it didn't bother me. We've been married for 9 years now. We met at 15 and are now 28. We've grown up together, graduated together, traveled together. We know each other so well and have nothing to hide from one another. Or so I thought. This all changed one day. I was feeding our kids lunch and she was in the bathroom. Unbeknownst to her, she did not lock the door. When I walked in on her, I witnessed something that I never thought I would see. Something that lived in the back of my head, but I didn't think it could be real. My wife of 13 years relationship, 9 years of marriage, 3 kids together, was shaving her upper lip. She is Puerto Rican and has a little peach fuzz that you can't even really notice. And she was shaving it like it was a full-on mustache. She looked at me with this embarrassed look and I thought to myself, what else is she hiding? I don't know that I'll ever look at her the same again. That one was really cute. I like the tongue-in-cheek nature of it. She would ignore my opinion about anything. It started small, like forcing me to watch movies I didn't like with her. After that, she made dinner with food I disliked, then go to theme parks even though I told her I didn't want to go in a roller coaster. Over the years, it escalated to her saying we wanted at least 3 children. I've never wanted kids, and she knew that. I started to notice I didn't want to spend time with her anymore. It was exhausting. So, bye. We were together for 4 years before she told me she was obsessed with Star Wars. Like, what the hell? That's day one stuff. We could have been going to midnight shows and dressing up. Oh, the squandered time. One of you could have been Chewbacca and the other could be Han Solo. I didn't have much to do with my significant other, now ex's parents, for the first few years. This changed after we were married, and I discovered that she was basically a psychological carbon copy of her father, and I, her mother. Only problem with that was her father was a domineering man who wore his wife down over many years to the point that she was basically mute and offered no resistance to him. What he wanted, he got. My ex was already showing a tendency to bully me into supplication, and I realized I was heading down the same path as her mother. I had already started giving up trying to argue about anything with her. I saw my future quite clearly one day and left. To come to that realization, like, the back and forth and look in the mirror, that must be terrifying. Well, one day I was having a really crappy day at work. Headache, annoyed at my coworkers, etc., and was moaning about it to him. Then he shows up unannounced with Advil and my favorite coconut water, which was really frickin' sweet and made my day good again. But then, when I get home, this dude had a new PS4 controller waiting for me, with takeout from my favorite Mexican restaurant. So yeah, reevaluated a whole bunch, and now I'm saving up for a ring. What are some psychological experiments with interesting results? White rats and black rats were raised separately without seeing each other. When a black rat was placed in the white rat's cage, the other rats ostracized him. When white rats and black rats are raised together and a new black rat is placed in a cage, the white rats accept him. So basically, rats are racist unless raised to accept differences. The self-fulfilling prophecy studies are very important to social psychology, and their findings have many real-world applications. Basically, they brought together a group of kids and formed a class with a real teacher. They gave the kids a test for overall academic skill at the start of the course, but didn't really use the scores. Instead, they told the teachers that a few students picked at random were very brilliant and scored very highly. They then observed the class for a long period of time and noticed that the teachers gave the kids they thought were brilliant much more attention. At the end of the study, the kids took the test again, and they found that the kids who were randomly named brilliant at the start actually scored higher than the rest of the class. The kids, again, at the start didn't score any different from the rest of the class, but through the self-fulfilling prophecy, they became the best in their class. This obviously has tons of applications in the real world and especially education. The monster experiment. Although it is horrible how they left the children with mental health issues at the end, the experiment gave very good insight to how to parent a child. In this experiment, they took groups of orphan children and separated them into 3 groups. One was the control, the second were told they had a lisp and were doing bad, and the third was told that their speech was perfect. As the experiment went on, Group 2 began developing lisps after being berated constantly. They became shy and reserved. They were scared to speak because they didn't want to get in trouble because of their poor speaking skills. Group 3, however, had the opposite happen. They spoke better, they were more willing to improve, they were encouraged to keep speaking and told that their speech was amazing and perfect. By the end of the experiment, they had one group with no change, one group with now mentally ill children with a speech impediment, and one group with great speaking skills. It truly showed shows that encouraging children is the way to go, and that verbal abuse can be just as, if not more, harmful as physical abuse. All things in moderation, as they say. I think any excessive amount of abuse or even nurturing and confirmation or whatever can be bad for anyone growing up. Because on one hand, you get people who grow up into quivering leaves of human beings, and that's unfortunate, but you can grow out of that. And then you have people who just become egotistical or maybe struggle to accept objective facts and maybe don't like it when people disagree with their more subjective opinions. The Monopoly Study by Paul Piff. He basically brought two strangers into the lab together and had them play a game of Monopoly together. He randomly assigned one participant to start the game with twice as much money than the other, and that participant also got to roll both dice to get around the board, i.e., the other participant started with half the money and could only roll one dice. At the end of the game, when he asked the participant who started with more money why he won the game, they would chalk it up to their excellent strategy and gamesmanship, rather than the fact that they had started the game with way more resources. It says a lot about how we deal with being born into a privileged state. I am skeptical as to whether or not you can actually equate real life in a game of Monopoly together and whether or not people would be that blind to their advantages. Not entirely sure if it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan experiment, 13 people feigned mental illness to get into mental hospitals, and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released, they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital, and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan, in fact, hadn't sent anyone. The Three Christs of Ypsilanti. A psychologist forces three people who believe that they are Jesus Christ to live together. It does not go well. The psychologist in question, Milton Rokeach, had heard of a case where two men who believed that they were Mary, Mother of Christ, were forced to live together, and one of them broke free from their delusion. So he figured, three Christs. What would happen? They were angry at each other, often had physical fights. They eventually started getting along by avoiding the topic. He would ask them about the others, and each would say that the others were crazy, that they, of course, were the real Jesus. No cures, some unethical stuff, but interesting. I'm a huge fan of Milgram's Small World experiment. It is more sociology than psychology, but I still think it's really cool. Milgram sends out 160 letters containing the name and address of a stockbroker in Boston to people in Omaha, Nebraska. They had to send it to someone they thought would get the letter closer, but they couldn't mail it directly to the stockbroker. Interestingly, most people that sent on the letter sent it on to the same group of people on the fifth degree. It only took 6 people, hence the 6 degrees of separation, to arrive on average. It shows how interconnected our world is, even before the internet, which is happy to think about. That is kind of nice to think about. If you stare into a dimly lit mirror for 10 plus minutes, you start to see hallucinations. What individuals see tends to vary, but they've used this as a test to simulate schizophrenia before because some see monsters, deformities, or general weird stuff. I did a variation of it for a friend in uni and completely wimped out of it after my face started not looking like my face anymore. I had a complete disassociation. I stopped looking and just waited out the time. I loved learning about infant development. My favorite was probably the development of depth perception, or perhaps the fear of heights. We're not born with it, but if I recall correctly, we develop it within the first year or so. Scientists created a raised square platform. Half of the floor was wood and the other half glass. The actual surface of the floor, 1 meter or so below, was white with red polka dots. At varying intervals of age, the babies would be brought in and placed on the wood and encouraged to crawl to their moms, who is standing at the glass end of the platform. In early infancy, babies crawl over there without giving a crap. At some point, though, they stop at the point where the wood meets the glass, or plexiglass, maybe, showing that they recognize the difference in height and the fear of falling. Babies' brains are pretty frickin' cool. It is definitely interesting to watch something that has low intelligence or self-awareness slowly gain more of it over time. You know, it's the process of how having a kid and everything is interesting. Reconsolidation. When you retrieve a memory from your long-term memory, it is susceptible to being manipulated. This can lead to memories being totally changed from the source. This is why eyewitness accounts cannot be fully seen as true. This knowledge is also being used to help people with PTSD by changing the negative memories they have of their particular particular trauma. The influence of the color red in sports. Judges were shown a video of a taekwondo match and awarded more points to the red competitor versus the blue competitor. When the colors were digitally reversed, judges awarded more points to the other, now red competitor. Red may be a signal of dominance, as reddened skin is associated with higher testosterone or possibly higher fertility in women. Wearing red may induce intrinsic psychological effects which increase dominance in addition to altering the perception of others. Researchers found that putting red leg bands on birds increased dominant behavior as they took the lion's share of the food. For my psychology degree dissertation, I presented photos of men to be rated on a scale of friendly 0 to threatening 10. Men received a higher threat score if I photoshopped their t-shirt to be red. Mice were put on two sides of a wall with a door in. Only the right mouse could open the door. Slowly, they filled the left mouse's room with water, and eventually when the right mouse saw them in danger, they opened the door. However, mice that had previously been on the left side and were now on the right, mice who had previously been wetted, opened the door considerably faster because they knew how unpleasant it was to be in the other scenario. Basically, mice have empathy. That's nice to know, but now I want an experiment where there are stakes, risks. I want there to be a moral dilemma in this situation for the mouse. What do you do, Mr. Mouse? Save the stranger with the cure for the entire mouse colony, or save your family? I just recently heard of blind-sightedness during one of my cognitive psychology classes. Basically, the area of the brain that processes what our eyes see is located at the back of the head, just where your skull starts to get smaller, towards your neck. Because of this, if you hit your head back there quite often, everything will go black for a moment before sight returns again. Sometimes, though, following severe trauma to this area of the brain, like after falling off a ladder onto a curb or something, a person is never able to see again. For a long time, it was assumed that the eyes were somehow incapable of seeing following the trauma, and that was why people were blind. However, it's been shown that it is just the processing of the images that is damaged. In other words, your eyes are still working away, viewing images, but your brain is unable to process the images, so you can't see them. Some experiments looking into this have found that people with damage to this area can still navigate around things in front of them without realizing they are doing it. So if you told someone with this damage to walk down a corridor and you placed obstacles in their way, they wouldn't be able to see the obstacles, but they could have a void bumping into them because their eyes are still able to view them and send signals to other areas of the brain to avoid knocking things. This is known as blind-sightedness. Blew my mind a little. And with that, you have ruined Daredevil forever. He's not really blind, he's just got blind-sightedness. To like the nth degree, I suppose. One time I participated in a paid research experiment. I was basically tricked into thinking I was drunk. I was placed in a room with two other people, and we were instructed to drink vodka with cranberry juice over a period of time while we socialized. After we drank, I was placed in a room where I had to read some flashing words on a computer. I felt pretty drunk at this point. When the researcher came back into the room, he gave me my car keys and said I was never actually given alcohol. He briefly told me that because I was anticipating drinking for this experiment, that my brain had tricked me into feeling the effects of being intoxicated. I immediately snapped out of it and was completely amazed at how I felt. Solomon Ash's experiment on conformity. He set up a test wherein he would show 3 lines of different lengths to 5 or 6 individuals. I forgot the exact number, who had to state which line was the longest of the 3. The thing is, only the last individual is the participant and the others are actors paid to answer in a specific manner. For the first few questions, they chose the correct answer, but later on they start choosing the wrong one. The participants are conflicted as to whether they will say the correct answer or conform to the wrong answer, as to not be judged by others or due to self-doubt of their own answers. In the end, most do conform. It's really interesting since it shows how powerful conformity is in the face of doubt, up to a point that some even question their own sanity during the test. Another variation of the experiment also had interesting results. It had the same setup with 5 individuals, with the last person being the participant. However, this time, some of the actors say the wrong answer while one actor says the correct one. There was an increase in participants who would choose the correct answer and avoid conformity. It shows how much doubt one can have on oneself when alone, but be brought back to self-confidence when they find outside support. Here's a twofer for you. So way back in the day, researchers examined the brains of cab drivers in London versus regular people via brain scanning. MRI, I believe, but I can't recall. They found that the cab drivers had cognitive advantages over regular people and also had a larger hippocampus, the area of the brain primarily involved in memory storage and recall. And just the other year, researchers investigated the effects of video games on cognitive decline. They had older people either play Mario 64 or Mario Galaxy, took virtual piano lessons, or they did nothing. This lasted 6 months. The researchers measured brain size before and after the experiment began. They also gave the participants a test on their short-term memory and cognitive functioning before and after the experiment as well. Mario group increased gray matter in the hippocampus and cerebellum, improved short-term memory and cognitive functioning. Piano group increased gray matter in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and cerebellum, no change in cognitive functioning. Control had no significant change. The authors believe that it was because the participants had to learn and navigate through a virtual world in order to beat the game that they wound up developing their short-term memory. The results were similar to those found in cab driver research. Mario doesn't provide players with an in-game map the way Call of Duty does, so they have to develop an internal cognitive map of the virtual world in order to get around it. Now, it's important to remember that the changes in cognitive functioning were very small to the extent that I would argue that they aren't actually meaningful, that the sample size in this experiment were very small, which would have skewed the results, and that it was very recent and still needs to be replicated. But the results to me are fascinating in that they suggest that certain video games may provide certain benefits to older people. I'd really like to see what happens if they had participants play the game for longer than 6 months, since realistically, gamers won't just play games for a 6-month period, they play for years. Man, Mario Galaxy is the bomb. I love that game so much. This is something I've been thinking about lately, actually. I hate the fact that some games nowadays don't have mini-maps. I mean, I used to be great with directions in video games, but I think over time I have gotten worse because of the constant use of mini-maps within video games. The Selective Laziness of Reasoning is an article I found and then partially replicated in my research methods class during my undergraduate. It's so great with a very interesting method and results that make you think about discussion and arguments a lot. Basically, the researchers presented participants with different syllogism, logic puzzles like all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, so Socrates is mortal, etc. And they asked them to provide their answers and also their reasoning for the answers. Later on, participants were asked to return and they presented some of their old answers, but the answers were reversed to be exactly what they had written down previously. But if their own argument from prior was presented as someone else's, they would disagree with it. Essentially, the lesson was we critically evaluate other people's arguments with much more focused lenses, and we afford ourselves less loopholes to jump through to validate and substantiate our own claims. Diet and behavior in children. Sugar and sweets don't make kids hyper. I love this one because it's so counterintuitive and every parent loves to tell you how their kid definitely does. Researchers took a bunch of parents and their kids and split them into 2 groups, those who get healthy fruit and those who get sugary sweets. The kids were separated from their parents for a moment and given the fruit or the sweets. A few minutes later, the parents were brought back in and either told the truth about what they'd been given or lied and told the opposite. The parents and kids were left by themselves with an assortment of toys and the parents were asked to rate their kids' behavior. What they found is that irrespective of what they were actually given to eat, parents who were told their kids had sugary sweets reported worse behavior than those who were told they had fruit. Again, irrespective of what they actually had. The interesting thing is that when you actually looked at the kids' behavior, they really were misbehaving, generally being more inclined to screech, throw toys around, or ignore instructions. Turns out it's actually the parents' behavior that determines how the kids act. The same study has also been done with sugary drinks versus water, same result. Another interesting experiment is the Loftus experiment of fake memories and the power of suggestion. It's basically about implanting memories of events that have never taken place, or alter the subject's detailed memory of that event. You can quite easily test this in real life. Find a busy picture of a village, preferably cartoon and vividly colored, allow a test subject to inspect the picture for 20 to 30 seconds, and let them know that you'll be asking questions. Turn the picture face down and ask 2 to 3 questions about the contents of the picture, preferably easy to answer questions. Was there an X in the picture, or did Y happen? Also mix in a fake question there. For instance, the picture may have had a skyline but no sun. If you ask the subject whether the sun was yellow or orange, chances are that they will create a memory of a sun being visible in the picture and tell you a color. The Loftus experiment has been used to disqualify young children from giving testimonials in judicial proceedings, and follow-up experiments have included implanting memories of fake balloon rides and parents losing the subject in a mall as a toddler. another. It's quite fascinating. The last two stories have done nothing but inform me of one thing and one thing alone. Children cannot be trusted. The elevator groupthink study, very amusing and sad at the same time. The experiment involved several actors entering an elevator with an oblivious participant. They then begin to perform a series of odd behaviors, such as they all stood facing the rear of the elevator. Inevitably, everyone else who got on ended up also facing the rear so as to not stand out from the rest. The study demonstrates how easily people succumb to group pressure to behave in a certain way. I don't think these ones are that good in that these events are happening in a vacuum in a very specific place. So if I saw everyone looking the back end of an elevator, for example, I would assume that maybe it's one of those elevators with two doors and that everyone else has like used it before, especially if it's an elevator that I've never used before. If it's one that I had used before, I'd probably be stood there being like, what the hell is everyone doing? Research into where morality comes from. They asked people taboo questions like, a brother and a sister are alone in a cabin in the woods one night. They are both over 18 and decide to make love once, as they think it will strengthen their relationship. The sister is on birth control and the brother wears a condom just to be safe. Is this act wrong? Or another question was, a woman is cleaning her house and has no rags, so she finds an old American flag, tears it up, and uses it to clean her house. Is this act wrong? They created stories like this to give an initial reaction of disgust. They would then ask the participant to explain their answers. Most people couldn't give a good answer, only saying, it feels wrong. They then went further and the interviewer would try their best to change the participant's mind, saying things like, well, no one saw, no one got hurt, etc., but participants wouldn't change their original response. The conclusion was that people make intuitive, emotional, split-second decisions all the time, and the reasoning, logical portion of the brain tries its best to explain the decision, but cannot change the initial decision. See The Rightful Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Subjects were tested for introvert versus extrovert personality types. Prediction was that when placed in a sensory deprivation chamber, the introverts would be able to handle it easily while the extroverts would not. Exactly the reverse was found. Introverts became agitated quickly and performed all manner of self-stimulation. Extroverts quickly went to sleep. What the findings showed was that it's introverts who are the sensation seekers, needing stimulation from the outside world. Extroverts create their own internal sensation and project that out to the world. Oh man. I'm such an introvert. Base rats. You probably know that if you drop a cat upside down that they'll right themselves and land on their feet. Rats have this reflex too. Even baby rats have this reflex. However, slower, which is tested by dropping them upside down in a tank of water. The baby rats will flip themselves upright as they float down through the water before they are scooped out and dried off. It was assumed that all reflexes are innately coded for in their genes. A group of researchers from the developmental psychobiology field didn't believe in this idea of innate reflexes. They believed that reflexes are learned through non-obvious experience. The researchers took a newly pregnant rat and sent her into space. The rat gestated the babies in space and was brought back to Earth just before giving birth. The baby rats were born on Earth in the lab. When the baby space rats were tested for the righting reflex, they didn't show it. They just floated through the water like they didn't know which way was down, because the baby rats didn't have experience with gravity in utero. They didn't learn about gravity and didn't develop the innate reflex. Therefore, other reflexes may be just as experience-driven as this one. Teachers, what do you know about your students that they think you don't know? I have never understood how students think if they lower their volume by 2 notches we suddenly become deaf. It's an enclosed space with 15 to 30 other people. If I don't hear it once, it will probably get repeated and I'll hear it again. I think the issue is students think we have so much on our plate with a lesson that we're in a whole other world. But really, this could be the 3rd or 4th time I've done this lesson this week, or even the 20th time in my career. When everything is basic rehearsal, you can zone out into other conversations pretty easily. I know who the loose girls are, the illegal substance dealers, the gang members, and when the fights are going to occur. I know each administrator has about 5 fake social media accounts and keeps tabs on what everyone is saying, and by Monday I will know what shenanigans you got up to over the weekend. I also know how to get out of going to the rally, which narc will look the other way and let you ditch class, and where people do the illegal substances on campus. I know that during lunch some have SX in the bathroom next door to my classroom, but they use protection. I've seen they use condoms on the floor, and by the end of the first month of school, I know when you're lying, and I know when you've had a crappy night at home. I know who has crappy parents and who has no parents. I know of one of my students who sometimes sleeps on the park bench and a few who are abused. I know several who take care of their siblings. I know of learning disorders and mental disorders. I know how much you have the capacity to handle and know that math is not the most important thing in the world. My 8th graders call me Miss B because for some reason they can never remember or pronounce my full name. One of my classes has started calling me Miss Booty. When I hear them using it with each other, I pretend that I heard my name and ask if they need any assistance in the most chipper and obnoxious teacher voice possible. It's nice to see them jump when I respond. It's also nice to take a break from overhearing disgusting, prepubescent, school bathroom, counter, nasty business, bus ride, BJ horror stories by dropping in on the Pokemon conversations that spring up every now and then from the quiet kids that are probably even bigger weirdos. As the daughter of a teacher, you just learn things about students you never repeat, and you learn things about other teachers. My mom teaches special education, and she is bound to secrecy about everything, and she doesn't let up on it. But I hear other teachers talk about students like they're garbage. They talk about the parents, they even talk about each other. Teachers are the worst gossips. You want to hear some crap? Just stay after school. I teach at a public university. For something like 8 years, I've been sitting in on the first day of class every semester, quietly dressed like a student. Every now and then one or two of them catch on, but most of them are clueless. They start talking about how they haven't done the homework for the first day, or how they've looked me up on Rate My Professor, or why I'm such a tool and late on the first day. I hear about being high or drunk or hungover that morning. I usually wait about 10 minutes when they're thinking of leaving before I stand up and start class. Maybe it's because I'm English, but I've discovered how hard it is for me to say a word like start and then follow it up with class, start class. But rather I go start class because obviously they sound more similar. I only bring this up because I'm sure people have maybe noticed that sometimes I deviate between something like grass and grass, bath or bath, and start and class. God, I'm all tongue-tied now. Middle school teacher here. When you put your hand in front of your mouth to talk to whisper to a friend, I can tell, and your voice isn't nearly as quiet as you think it is, so I can hear what you're saying too. When you're staring at your crotch and giggling every once in a while, I know you're texting or on social media, but sometimes I don't say anything because that's the only time you're not disrupting the rest of the class. When I do take your phone away until the end of the day, I hand it over to the dean who checks all your texts and social media accounts you're logged into. We bust your friends by checking who you're texting during school hours and email their teachers so they can just coincidentally notice their phone. When you're out for a family emergency for a week and come back with a tan and a tourist t-shirt, I know you're lying, especially when this is the third time in 2 years your grandmother has died. Seriously, please come up with something that doesn't insult my intelligence quite so much. You did understand your homework, you just didn't prioritize accomplishing it. The kids that didn't understand but tried used the 20 different tools I provided to assist you with it, and brought it to me before or at the beginning of class, not when I asked you to turn it in. Also, the dean and counselor fill me in on all your behavior and home issues. The nurse, who really is supposed to keep your medical issues private, is the biggest gossip in the school. Last of all, when you screw up and I have to call you on it, just acknowledge and or apologize. I don't want to reprimand you or correct you any more than you want it, but it's part of my job. It's annoying to call your parents and fill out the paperwork when you screw up big. I won't turn it into a big deal unless you escalate it to a point that I have to do something about it. Well, based on the information that this person is giving, it sounds like this school has it on lockdown. I mean, it seems kind of invasive in some ways, but like they said, you're not supposed to have your phone out in class. I used to be in IT, but had a very messy divorce a couple of years back, and I now teach English in international schools in Japan. We all have school-issued computers with an integrated social network, and I can see all of the messages that the students send, even the private ones, to monitor online bullying, and I am not to let anyone know that I can see students' private messages. I got curious and started spying on them full-time. I learned about a couple of serious relationships between my class and one heterosexual and one homosexual, as well as learning that one of my students has a serious crush on me. Another came out of the closet, but everyone knew already, and then ended up dating a classmate. One girl went completely MIA, and all of us, including me, assumed she had deleted herself. I started getting strange emails about her death, but it turned out she had simply moved away, and all of the kids knew I was spying on them. I live and teach high school kids in a small town, and one of my students, just this total sweetheart, wonderful girl, is dating the scariest guy I have ever seen. Huge dude, lots of tattoos and piercings, way older than her, drives a souped-up deathmobile around town, that kind of thing. Just all around a sketchy guy. It's big school gossip. Everybody knows and talks about it all the time. This student definitely enjoys the attention and always drops hints about what a bad boy he is. Late one night, on a school night, I pulled into a convenience store parking lot to pick up a few things and notice his car there. They walk out of the store together and get back in the car with ice cream. He picked her up from school and bought her ice cream, and they were just sitting in his car being adorable and sweet. When I got out of my car to go to the store, I could hear that they were listening to show tunes. Best part, we ended up driving out of the parking lot at the same time, and the guy spotted me and gave me the friendliest hi ever. Don't judge a book by their cover, I suppose, but it's kind of worrying when kids in high school are dating people who are significantly older and not even in education anymore. I mean, heck, I remember one guy who got absolutely roasted when he was in year 11 because he was dating a year 7. So that's like, an 11 to 12-year-old dating a 16-year-old, which is definitely sketchy. Middle school teacher in a pretty rough school here. I know about their parents, illegal substances, unemployment, or legal problems from data our school is given, and from the parents outright telling me during phone calls or meetings. It's crazy and kind of trustworthy what the parents offer up to me. I've had them tell me, and the school counselor too, that so-and-so cousin was murdered in front of them last week, that's why they've been gone, or there's a lot of kids being bad touched. One kid I recall finally had enough and pulled a gun on his dad, after being molested for probably years. It's hard to get them to work diligently after that. I also can't tell certain kids that their moms, who probably are just a few years older than me, made a pass at me before they knew I wasn't single. I'm a swim instructor, and I know if my students play the piano. How? Well, they swim their front crawl with piano hands until I correct them. What are piano hands? Piano hands are when the index, middle, and ring fingers are together but the thumb and pinky are extended outward, a good habit for someone who might need to hit a high or low note. I also have a psych degree, and my understanding for why this happens is due to interference from similar neural substrates in the cerebellum. I also have had a student with flute hands, and my boss has hockey hands. You should see the look on my students' face when I tell them I know they play the piano. They think I'm psychic. I used to work as a substitute. I learned more than I ever wanted to about the kids I taught. More often than not, I wanted to switch from whatever lecture I was on to one about the concept of plausible deniability. You want to talk to your buddy about how much devil's lettuce you smoked and how many loose women you got with? Great, do it somewhere else. I'm required to inform security and the office about that stuff. Yes, I will still do it even if your cousin is a gangster and will pop a cap in me. Kids in juvenile detention schools just have no sense of plausible deniability. We'll call him Ted. We had a food drive last semester before Thanksgiving for about 2 months. We made a huge basket of canned food, things to make pies, stuffing, sides, bought a turkey, and as a staff voted for what students' family needed it the most. We all agreed that Ted's family, without question, needed it the most. A teacher had to pay for his uniform early on in the year. So he was told close to Thanksgiving by administration that someone would be delivering a basket to his house that afternoon. I guess he was overwhelmed and didn't ask questions then, because he came to my class and asked me, "Is that the food we've been raising for poor people?" I didn't know what to say. I said, "Some of it." "So was it a random thing that I'm getting the basket?" I knew what he was asking, so I said, "Oh my goodness, you won?" He acted surprised. I said, "Man, I'm jealous. They put a basket together with the food left over they didn't donate and picked one person from our program in a drawing, and you must have won it." He was totally pumped. Before my class was over, I went to his next 4 classes and told the teachers to play along with the raffle story. They did. He doesn't know. Still a little annoyed that the admin told him. I feel like it could have been a left at the front door sort of thing. I love food drives and little stories like this. It really does warm my heart. The amount of crap I overhear is ridiculous. I know which of my students hosts all the parties and who made out and or hooked up with whom at said parties. I know who does the illegal substances. I know who does the illegal substances and doesn't think that the teachers know they do the illegal substances. I know that one of my students gives crappy BJs to a student in another one of my classes. I know who cheats on everything. Sometimes it's the goody two-shoes kid. I know that at least 3 students have agreed that they would totally tap that, meaning me. They think I'm oblivious. I have excellent hearing. Being a teacher, it would be really uncomfortable if students were just talking about what they'd want to do with you like that a lot. That would be really like, oof.
I was a TA to the same teacher for 4 years in high school. I was really uptight at the time and asked her why she didn't mind when the same dude left class every single day with the pass for at least 20 minutes. My teacher said it was because he was making out with his girlfriend in the stairwell closet, and so help her God if I interrupted them because she was the best he was ever going to get. Teachers know your stuff, man. That teacher's a real one. Such a good wingman. I'm not currently teaching, but when I was a student teacher, what I was surprised to find out right away, and all you who are still in high school should know this, is how easy it is to tell when you're being lied to. I mean, teenagers are terrible at lying. I absolutely knew when I was being lied to. But here's the thing, kids. If they don't call you out on your lie, it's not because you succeeded in being convincing, it's because you're probably the 50th person that day to do so, and it's seriously just not worth the effort over something small. This one girl would ask to go to the bathroom almost every day to see her boyfriend who had a different lunch than she did. She'd usually be gone only 5 or 10 minutes, so I frequently let her do so. I used to do exactly the same thing in school, so I know how it is. She did her work, so she earned my discretion on that case. Pro tip, if you give, you get. Put in the effort and you will have bargaining chips. Also, I just want you guys who are still in school to know this. Your teachers know how to keep a professional distance, but they are not robots, and they are not blind. They see what's going on with you, and they care. I cried at least once a week over my students. I only taught for a short time, and now, 2 years later, I remember all my students' names, would recognize them on sight, and remember who made me cry. Oh, no, not that tactic. I always hate it when people don't yell at you for doing something wrong, but they're just I'm disappointed. And it's no, don't do this to me. That they're in gangs and which gangs they're in. Really, you asked to borrow a pen, but you don't want to write with the one I give you because it's blue? You can't sit in a blue chair, but you're not in a gang? Nah. It's actually really sad. I've only been teaching for 5.5 years, and 2 of my former students have already been killed in gang-related violence. Middle school ESL teacher here. For the first month, I didn't tell my students I spoke Spanish. I'm white. In that month, I heard more about my butt than I ever wanted to know. Also some gossip, love lives, hate for school, the usual. How did my students not know that I speak Spanish if I'm an ESL teacher? The majority of ESL teachers, i.e. American teachers in China, Japan, or other Asian countries, do not know the native language. The accepted practice for ESL instruction is called English immersion. It basically means that all class time will be in the desired second language, in this case, English. ESL teachers use instructional methods such as TPR, fancy way of saying hand motions and body language, and other such methods to help level 1 students learn the basics. You'd be surprised how much you can learn by just pointing to things and saying the English word for it. How did I finally tell them? I did a class at the end of the month on the differences between English and Spanish. In Spanish, I just acted like nothing was different, asking questions in Spanish and instructing in Spanish. A more glorious feeling would be hard to find. How did they react? Jaws dropped, chaos saw ensued. Several students asked me if I spoke Spanish. I said in Spanish something like, "How could I speak Spanish? I'm a gringa." 2 students apologized after class for saying inappropriate things in class, and one particular vocal student ran out of the room and allegedly tossed his cookies in the bathroom. Hilarity ensued. Needless to say, I now have a great relationship with my students, and they know not to mess around when I'm in the room. I'm a high school teacher and have a class Twitter that my students can follow for homework updates, links to presentations, quizzes, etc. I told my students, don't ask me to follow you on Twitter because I won't. Not only do I not have the time to read your tweets, there are some things I just do not want to know. Your personal lives are one of them. I lied. After about 40 students followed, I went and snooped on every single one of their profiles and read all of their tweets. So much regret. So much. So what you're saying is you're a liar. One thing I know for sure is when my students are high. I've smoked quite a bit back in the day and therefore know all the symptoms and lingo. I totally mess around with them when they are stoned, not only because it is hilarious, but also in hopes to discourage them from smoking before coming to school. If I know it becomes a problem with any of them, then I will have the serious discussion about how you may not remember what you and your buddies talked about all those times when you were high, but you will sure as hell remember whether or not you passed my class. But for the most part, the stoners don't come to class too often and wait until after school. Teachers have huge amounts of access to students' information. We gossip, more than students do. We know everything. Who hooked up with who on camp, the weekend, and the holidays. We know about makeups, breakups, and everything in between. We know who smokes, we know who is doing the illegal substances, and who is getting up to mischief.
We know kids' asexual and gender orientation, sometimes before they do. It's mostly just from listening in class. Kids seem to think that teachers can't hear personal conversations or that we don't pay any mind to them. We do. Working at a high school is like living on the set of a soap opera. I still can't believe how devastated I was when my favorite couple of 2012 broke up. It was torturous. You know what? I get it. You've probably not got much going on. You're just doing your work. And it's like, all the little bits of drama and whatever you hear is just a little bit of entertainment in the day to get you through work and keep you occupied, I guess. My boyfriend is an elementary school teacher, and he says that he knows way more about students' personal lives than they think. Like, their parents tell them their problems with poverty, immigration, and stuff. Meanwhile, some of the kids are like, I went to Cabo for summer break, or parents' private jet, and he's just like, awesome. Why don't you write a journal entry about it? As a student, I was close with the student teacher at the time. I liked a boy, and he told me not to go for him because he had gotten in trouble before with child smut and illegal substances. No idea how he knew that. That does sound like the kind of thing that people would need to be notified about. I mean, I know someone who actually worked in care, and they had to, they were offered the job to escort someone who had at one point molested a child, and because they were special needs, they needed someone to go with them to college. And this person in question, who I know, after being informed about what the dirty diddler did, they outright refused to do the job. I'm pretty sure something as severe as anything to do with children, a crime like that is going to be told to anyone that has to deal with them on a regular basis in a professional manner. When I teach undergrads, it's painfully obvious which ones are dating each other, even if it's a secret. I recently taught a required course for freshmen, and one of my students would give me outlandish excuses for not having been in class. He had a breakup, 2 dead relatives, and was flown across the world to save his family business, all in one semester. Oddly enough, his work was pretty good. I had to sit him down and explain that I really didn't care where he had been as long as he was showing up to reviews with completed projects, and that a long-winded explanation was unnecessary. The look on this teenager's face when I told him, I'm going to be out today, was perfectly reasonable, priceless. As for when I'm teaching graduate students, I definitely do know hardly any of you little buggers have read the material beyond a thesis statement, unless you're PhD students sitting in on a master's level seminar, and in that case, I do know that you love the sound of your own voice more than Frank Reynolds loved rum ham. So shut up, you're ruining the class for the people who actually need it. Inner city middle school teacher here, I know everything my students gossip about during class. No, not because I have supersonic teacher ears, as many of my students suspect. No, not because that smoke detector in the corner is actually a camera, as I convinced them of earlier this year. It's because kids can't whisper worth a damn. Also, privacy settings. Seriously, kids, use them. Not to mention, those kids I had in class 2 years ago who come by my classroom to visit and make small talk every day after school. Yeah, they keep me more in the loop than most of the students. Sometimes it pays to be the cool teacher. But how sad it is when the cool teacher eventually grows up or gets promoted and then becomes the regular teacher. I understand your jokes, I just pretend that I don't. When I was a student, I would marvel at how my teachers could fail to understand the brilliant asexual innuendo I would use that would have my classmates snickering while they, the instructor, looked on without comprehending. Now I hear 18-year-old girls in my class make the same kinds of comments, and as a 36-year-old dude, my brain immediately begins flashing warning lights and sirens. So I play really dumb because I'm just not going to go there. And that is probably, honestly, for the best. High school teacher here. Regarding students' personal lives, it's very much a need-to-know basis. I don't really give a damn that you party on the weekends, get high after school with your buddies, or anything like that. The thing is that as teachers, we are mandated reporters for a lot of things. The less you know about stuff like that, the better. No teacher snoops Facebook for this very reason. If I see a student ripping a bong on their profile picture, I have to do something about it. That and perusing Facebooks of 14 to 18-year-olds is creepy as hell. What I do know is the stuff I think is necessary. Which students come from disadvantaged backgrounds, who comes from a 2-parent home, behavior and academic histories. The last thing you want to do is call home. A woman answers the phone and you assume it's a kid's mom when it's their sister who doubles as their primary caretaker. You don't want to tell kids that they should go on the school field trip and they come from a very low income home. A lot of kids probably assume teachers don't know stuff like this, but most of us go out of our way to make sure they do. I also also know which teacher's classes you're a butthole in. You don't really want to say anything about that to the kid either, because frankly, some teachers are buttholes and they have it coming. What did you totally misunderstand as a kid? When I was a child, we would go on a plane every time we'd visit Mexico, so I assumed Mexico was actually located in the sky. What? I used to believe that when you turned off the TV it would pause, was really upset when I would come back from dinner and my show would be over. That's so cute. I thought it was Pizza Hot, not Pizza Hut, until I was about 16 years old. I feel like such a douchebag laughing at these. Okay, I'll do one myself. When I was a really young boy, I didn't think we lived in England. I thought we lived in America because of all the American television I would watch, because I was a dumb butt. I would literally insist to my family, no, we live in America. We have dollars. I don't know why. I just didn't want to believe them. Oh, this one's gonna be fun. SX. I had a massive misunderstanding of SX that could have severely injured my adult life had it not been corrected. When I was younger, I was obsessed with biology and animals, so I knew how everything fit together. But those damn Hollywood movies messed up my perception of how humans actually did the horizontal limbo. In movies, couples get all hot and heavy. The screen fades to black and they wake up naked together. I guess I filled in the blanks with my 7-year-old brain and thought that after you got aroused, you just fell asleep naked together. And the penis just sort of autopiloted itself over to the vagina, threw up and snaked back. So when people said they were sleeping together, I took this literally. Made for an awkward encounter with my dad when I was 12, when I suggested he just go to sleep with pants on instead of getting a vasectomy. I thought that when you grew up, you got a special card that allowed you to go to the bank and have some money printed when you needed some at the ATM. And when I heard about guerrilla warfare on TV, I thought it meant that there was an army of really angry gorillas in other countries starting wars. I used to think that kidnapping was kids taking naps. I was very surprised as a kid to find out babies weren't pooped out and women had more than one hole. That if you got shot anywhere on your body, you would automatically die. I thought you had to marry someone who was born on exactly the same day as you were. I thought that God punished bad people and rewarded good people. Boy, was I wrong. When my parents used to talk about how things were black and white when we were watching TV, I thought they were talking about the whole world was black and white and wanted to know how everything was colored to what it is now. I had pictures of people painting grass in my head and thought this was the way the world was now colored. That'd be really trippy. One day you're like walking along and you see some grass that's just freshly grown in and it's all black and white, and then some people in a black van come in with a paintbrush and bucket and like paint over it, and they look at you and they're like, shh. The concept of race. In the second grade, there was this little poetry contest, and the prompt was to write about the human race. I wrote about a bunch of people running. You know what? I think we'd all be better off if we just thought like this young man once did. I thought the actors actually died when they died in movies. Okay, no, I get that one. I totally get that. I mean, I remember being such a little dummy. I remember liking Star Wars, loving Obi-Wan Kenobi, and when my mom told me, oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the old man as well, you know, I'm like, no, he's not. Obi-Wan Kenobi's young and cool. I think really I didn't want to believe that he then turned into an old man and died. When 9/11 happened, I thought that the reason my morning cartoons weren't showing was because a plane had crashed into the building that made the cartoons. I thought the island Martha's Vineyard was owned by Martha Stewart. When I was about 9, Nickelodeon advertised a Nick Takes Over Your School contest. The commercial was filled with kids playing games, teachers getting slimed, etc. I was terrified that my school might win. Nick would take over for a full school year and that everyone would get held back a year since there didn't appear to be any learning going on in the commercials. The Civil War. Little kid version of me couldn't understand why America was fighting over forks, knives, and spoons. What do they mean by that? Like, does anyone have an explanation for that? Please do say. I thought the car somehow knew whether we would turn left or right. I was amazed by those turn signals. Why Walt Disney wrote his last name with a backwards G. It does totally look like it says Gisney. Or would it be Gisney? That $20 was a lot of money. I thought firemen burned down buildings. This was because when I was 5 or so, our neighbors sold or donated their house to the fire department to help trainees. So every day for like a week, the fire department showed up and lit the house on fire. I guess I somehow missed the part where they then put the fire out. So for years, I was scared of firemen and thought they set houses on fire. It didn't come out until sometime later my parents gave me the whole, if anything bad happens, call the fire department talk. When I was young, I knew people did things on purpose when they meant to do them. I thought the word was unpurpose, though, and so naturally the opposite of unpurpose was purpose. Once in first grade, I was sent to the principal, and I kept insisting that I had committed said offense purposely. I thought Harry Potter was about bunny rabbits because Beatrix Potter wrote Peter Rabbit, so by the laws of word association, it was a series of books about little rabbits going on adventures with their friends. Ah, the word association game is a boy. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I remember not knowing that all the Final Fantasy games were set in different universes up to a point, except for when they decided that it was going to be a sequel, whatever, and I just assumed that any blonde main character that I saw was like Cloud with a different haircut because Cloud was the first protagonist I knew about in the franchise. I used to think people died on their birthday because the headstones I had seen didn't have months and days, just how many years. There were two boys in my pre-K class named Juan and Raj. I called them Juan and Garage instead. No wonder they never shared their toys with me. I thought there was a government agency called the Management for Your Protection because toilet seat cover dispensers always said, provided by the management for your protection. Whenever I was in the car with my parents while stuck in a traffic jam, I would wonder why the person first in line was going so slow. If only that jerk sped up, we would all move faster. Oh, I've been there. I was convinced that white dog poop in the backyard was dinosaur fossils, and I believed that my dad fought a guy in a boxing ring to win my mom. I was staying at my friend's house for the day once and had one of those annoying sneezes that just don't come out no matter how hard you try. I told my friend about it and he told me that if I had a sneeze stuck and I couldn't get it out that I could die. Of course this screwed with my 8-year-old brain pretty hard. Never did die. I didn't know the difference between the words grape and rake and used them interchangeably. I'm not talking about actual grapes. I don't know if that translates well because of the censors. At around 10, I started changing my new little brother's diapers. My little brother was circumcised, so whatever. Being a 10-year-old little girl, I don't see much penis. One day, I changed my little cousin's diaper, and I'm totally concerned with the way his junk looks, only to find out years later that he was uncircumcised. I used to think cancer was when your eyes got swirly things in them and your head spun around endlessly. No clue where that idea came from. When I was little, I would hear commercials advertising things for just $5.99. I used to think they meant $5.99. I would tell my parents that I wanted to buy it because I had enough money, and they were always pretty amused. Like everything. One thing I can remember is that I thought the USA national anthem went like, "By the dawn's early light," instead of "By the dawn's early light," as though dawn's early was just another one of those many words I was familiar with as a kid. I thought it was maybe an adjective, like the orange glow of the morning sun cast a dawn's-early mood over the park. I also thought as a very young kid that when you were fired from your job, the company killed you. I also thought dawn's-early was a word because I thought that's how they said it in the American national anthem. Once again, only knowing the American national anthem because I watched so many TV episodes from American shows like The Simpsons. My parents used to take me on vacation when I was younger, and we'd leave out of Newark, New Jersey airport. When taking off, you can see Bayonne, New Jersey, and it's all docks and cranes and ships. One time, I pointed out the window to the cranes and asked my father what that place was. He said, Bayonne, and until I was about 18 years old, I thought no person lived there, only worked there. I imagined it was just cranes and ships and docks. There was an infomercial for some kind of griddle. All I remember was people tapping a frozen hamburger patty or frozen chicken breast on the griddle, and it swipes to the next shot of the food fully thawed and cooking. I thought you had to tap the food on the griddle to turn it on. Oh no, Sonny, that's just a fun editing trick someone decided to do. When I was a kid, I had a book. In this book, a character moves to a new town. To do this, the family has the house lifted up and placed on the back of a truck and driven to an empty piece of land in the new town. I was convinced that this is what happened whenever anyone moved. What really got me was that other than this, the book was really plain and normal. See Jim run type stuff. It wasn't some kind of fantasy book or anything. We moved from a decent house with no yard to a trailer with a nicely sized yard. I was confused but thought it was just taking a long time for our house to arrive? No, we just had to actually live in the trailer. Biracial babies. I thought they would come out swirled. I don't know if this is controversial to say, but that sounds cool. Why my parents, when together, ever needed privacy. I thought I was supposed to sprout a second penis to match my two balls. I don't know if anyone remembers the kids' voices that answered the questions that Steve asked on Blue's Clues. Well, I thought those were just other kids that were watching the show at the same time, like there was some kind of microphone on the TV that would pick up my voice, and other kids watching would hear. So I used to whisper dirty words into my TV real quiet with my hands cupped around my mouth so my mom wouldn't hear, but the other kids watching would. I thought the lyrics to Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC were Dirty Deeds and the Thunder Chief. You know what, I'm pretty sure that I also grossly misheard that song and thought it said something else as well. I overheard my mom and dad talking about having to fire someone. I thought it meant they were going to set him on fire. The fact that they were upset and serious about it added to the illusion. I thought I must have two stomachs, one for food and one for drinks. How else would the food know to come out one hole and the drinks out another? When I was 5 in 1996, I thought for some reason that 1997 was 1,000 years in the future. So one day, my parents were watching local news, and there was a story on a golf course that would be completed in 97. And my thought was, you idiots, we'll all be long dead by then. Why does a golf course matter? When I was a kid and my mom didn't want me to watch something on TV, she would tell me that it was a scary show or scary movie. Well, I somehow got it in my head that the 2001 Planet of the Apes film was the single most terrifying movie ever made. I didn't see it until I was about 11 or 12 and then understood my mom's parenting techniques. I mean, good lord, I would not want to have to live through the ape-human war. God, that'd be terrifying, horrible. Why women's bodies didn't return to the former state immediately after giving birth. I told my mom she was still fat as we were leaving the hospital after she had my sister. Damn, kid. Harsh. My boyfriend told me this. Backstory. He was raised by a single mom and had 2 siblings. So my boyfriend overheard a conversation with his mom and babysitter. Apparently, they had a mutual friend who had a few kids. His mom sarcastically says, if she shakes hands with a guy, she'll get pregnant. Being a child, my boyfriend was obviously horrified. It took his mom a long while to figure out why he wouldn't shake hands when meeting people. My cousin had a chore chart of different categories like bedroom, bathroom, etc. The last category was labeled miscellaneous, and I always thought she had a neighbor that she did chores for and her name was Miss Alanius. Childbirth. I thought my dad would be able to have babies. They still have a good chuckle every time they tell that story. Marriage. I thought you had to find someone with the same last name to get married. It didn't help my parents didn't correct me on it. More so because they have different last names and were common law married until it was abolished a few years ago. I figured my parents were rebels. It's not the weirdest assumption kids have made about what constitutes getting married or how you get married, I guess. Autism. I always thought autism was like a license to drive cars. Autoism. I believe that you had to get diagnosed with autism by a doctor so that you were fit to drive. Makes sense, right? On television, informative autism commercials would constantly air and there would be a test crash dummy impacting a car. I thought that if you didn't have autism, you wouldn't be able to drive and you would get into an accident and turn into a crash test dummy. It all made sense a few years ago. I still don't have my license. I was 17 when I learned my favorite animal, the jackalope, wasn't real. I totally get that. It is mundane enough, it is plausible enough that it's like, yeah, that could be real. I think I might have been around the same age or older. I was 50-50 for a while though. I remember saying to my friend, hey, a jackalope's real? And he even looked at me and was like, I don't think they are they? And we both looked it up on the internet. And so, yeah, rabbit with antlers, it's plausible. I get it. I have a couple that I have my parents to blame for. They made me think that you can unlock the car by voice command and always got me to shout, unlock, as they would unlock it with their remote. Sadly, this went on for much longer than it should have. Second, when I would be at my mom's work, she would tell me to cover my eyes completely with my hands while she made photocopies of any documents because she said I would go blind. I think I was between 5 and 8 years old. They make fun of me from time to time, but I apparently had no reason to not trust my parents. Back when I was a little one, about 4 or 6 years old, I was forced to go to Sunday school. During our Sunday school sessions, we would all sit around a large lady talking about Jesus and all of his crazy antics. I wasn't much for listening, but knew I should probably get some key facts in case I'm asked what I learnt in Sunday school. This particular session, we were learning about Adam and Eve. To summarize the tale, there is an apple which caused bad things to happen when you eat it, and 2 naked people. Anyway, fast forward to the next weekend where our family is hosting a family get-together. South American families have a lot of relatives. As my mother is showing people people around our yard, she plucks out an apple. I smack it out of her hand and proceed to explain why she couldn't eat the apple. I had gotten the notion that somehow Adam and Eve became naked by eating the apple, and there was no way in hell I wanted to see my mother naked. Anyway, to this day, I can't eat apples in peace around my family without some sort of wisecrack.
You should have paid better attention. It kind of reminds me, though, of how one time me and my friend got through a class where we were learning about the book Great Expectations, where we didn't actually read the book, but instead we referenced the episode of South Park where they did Great Expectations by subtracting and deducing what was too crude to be legitimate for the original work, and we actually got through the class really well. My dad was such a terrible highway driver that when we went on our annual vacation, he inevitably got into a car accident, usually a minor fender bender. I thought that every trip needed to include an accident and would pester him while on the road. When's the accident going to happen? When's it going to happen? What is wrong with you? I'm just picturing like the insurance agent, the police, every year on that day, on that annual trip, it's like, well, it's going to happen inevitably. This guy's going to call up and, or whatever, or someone's going to call up about them, and the police are like, he's coming. I know he is. He's never let me down. Thought drinking and driving referred to any type of beverage, so when my uncle took a Coke for the road, I was shocked. I'd always heard that you could only survive a couple days without drinking water. Well, I stayed with my southern grandparents for likely 2 weeks. During that time, I drank nothing but iced tea. I was really worried I was going to die soon. I thought Albert Einstein created and gave life to a monster called Frank Einstein, and that's why he was considered a genius. I thought when you moved somewhere, you had to find a person in that town who needed to move to your town and then swap homes with them. When people said, I'm serving so my kids don't have to, I assumed that meant your kids were forced into the military if you didn't do it? Kids are literal. That'd be a terrifying prospect for certain. I didn't realize John Lennon was a different person than Lenin, the Soviet premier, as the names are pronounced almost the same and both had a huge impact in the 20th century. The world made a lot more sense once that one got cleared up. Before I ever had the talk, I inferred that babies were in fact made when two people kiss and their germs mix. I wasn't that far off. I didn't understand that TV shows were recorded, so when I saw the actors jumping in age from young to old and vice versa in the span of a week, I thought it was some type of wizardry. I'm surprised I haven't seen one saying, I thought the cartoons were like in or behind the TV and I just had to like catch them when they were off guard or something. I was raised very Catholic. For some reason, I thought a person's torso was called their body, so when I learned that when people die, their bodies stayed on earth while the rest of them went to heaven, I thought upon death a person's head, arms, and legs flew off and went into the sky. I also thought people had funerals for torsos. It was pretty metal. What a charming mind you must have. I mean that legitimately, by the way. I thought for a very long, almost too long time that an only child was pronounced lonely child because they had no siblings. When I was in pre-K, I was walking down the hall to recess, just chilling out with one of my friends, when I saw one of those handprints made out of paper with a student's name on it. You know, the ones you have all your kids make and then you put them on your door. Anyways, the name on this one was Jesus. Hey, look, Jose, there's a kid named Jesus. It's Jesus. I've read my children's Bible 5 times. I think I know how to say Jesus. No, it's a Mexican name. You just say the J like H, like with my name. Jose does not have a J. I know how to spell my name, man. And I know how to spell Jesus. We fought about it for at least 5 minutes. I was not a fun kid. I thought everyone lived to the exact same age, like my brother taunted me for being 3 years younger than him, but in my mind it was no sweat because I was going to be alive for 3 more years after he died. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's also a thought that passed through my mind at one point or another. At least it sounds weirdly familiar to me. I misunderstood cardinal directions. I thought north was always in front of me. I misunderstood my family taking me to see the circus. I thought all the animals and people were there to see me. I misunderstood cashiers. I thought they had all that money and items. I misunderstood SX, despite learning about it from a book that was supposed to scientifically show it in the way kids understand. I thought a giant sperm climbs up the woman's leg as the couple holds hands. Certainly, if that were the way that it went, I don't think anyone would be interested in doing the deed. People just said, "He died for your sins," over and over and never explained what that meant, as if it was obvious. It's not. But I wasn't born yet. He died for your sins. As punishment for my sins? Or he died for your sins? For me or for the sins? He died for your sins. So does that mean it's okay to sin? He died for your sins. So am I forgiven or he died for your sins? Please explain that phrase, Mom. Until Jesus died, sins could not be forgiven. Because of the ritual sacrifice, sins can now be forgiven. This may or may not apply to people who sinned before his death. Why didn't God just say, "Okay, I forgive sins now"? Jesus died! Sorry! When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.